live video will be starting soon. Okay, now live. Okay, we are live this evening. Thank you everyone for joining. Welcome to the Monday podcast, which is a very unfiltered podcast for men right here at the Empowerment Daily. And of course, our aim is to bring light to social issues, mental issues, health issues, any issues that really affect men. This is what we discuss on this podcast, and tonight we have a very special episode because we have a special guest who is joining us, and we have Mr. J. Christopher Hunt. I guess the J is for Julian.
Yep.
Yes, Mr. J. Christopher Hunt, who is joining us on the Monday podcast. And tonight we're going to have a very open, unfiltered discussion about the creativity of men. We're looking at youth in politics. We're looking at Looshans. We're looking at any topic that comes up. And of course, I'm very honored to have Mr. Christopher Hunt in the studio today. You have been someone who I can say has set themselves apart as maybe one of the most creative Lucians they've ever they've ever had. You don't know about that? All right. Well, I see it as your creativity has yet to be matched by an individual person. So I think if we're looking at it on that criteria, then that might be a good place to start when it comes to describing you. You know, I've seen persons who have gone from, doing phone comedy and they've blown up, they've become influencers. I've seen persons who've expressed political interests maybe on a smaller scale and they've run up for office. And I've seen persons who enter the Calypso arena, enter the Soca arena, do their thing and, leave a lasting legacy. But to see someone who do all these facets is exemplary, right?
I honestly thought that's how all of us were. And I still, to a large extent, think that's how all of us are.
Mm-hmm.
I I felt that, and it's a term that I only learned much later in life, pluralistic ignorance.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that a lot of people saw the world as I did, or at least saw St. Lucia
Mm-hmm.
as I did. And mentally, my attitude was, you know, that just, why not? Worst thing that could happen. And I don't see it so much as creativity compared to experimentation. And if you're willing to try something, why not? One life to live,
Mm-hmm.
so why not? So for me, I guess it was more a question of morbid curiosity than it was, oh, I feel that I'm so talented in this or that, because I don't feel that nobody will look at me and think of me as a vocalist or an
Mm-hmm.
actor,
Yeah.
or any of these things. It's just anything, why not? Let's just try it kind of a thing. And you learn along the way if you're willing to make the mistakes. They tell you now that anybody that spends 18 minutes a day on anything is probably qualified in that field to a master's or PhD level. So it's really what your focus is. And mine was, I don't know if I can use the language, but effing around, So, I mean, you have places in school for the bright guy. You have places in school for the reserved or the quiet woman. You have the poet. You have this, that, and the other. But where does the class clown go?
Yeah.
Now I know the answer. It goes nowhere.
I like the fact that you use the term experimentation because one thing that has always piqued my curiosity, considering your background because you've been very open about being in a political family. Your dad being in politics, you had an uncle who was on the other side of that politics, and basically always in an atmosphere where politics was the thing of the day. you're at SMC, and I think with any father, the expectation would be, my son would be inspired by what I do, and maybe he would take after me. But I'm not too sure where the idea for Looshans originated.
Well, there are a couple of things.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, I it's not a secret. I'm an underachiever in terms of compared to my father's legacy and my mother.
Mm-hmm.
But in that sense, you also get to a point where at one point in your life it's instincts. At other point, you just realize not everybody is exactly the same. And I always remember my father telling me it was only when he became president of the UN, the United Nations, that when he was up there and he would go to Chris Rock concert, or he'd go to a Shania Twain concert, or he went to Carnegie Hall, then he understood what it was that I was trying to do truly with Lucians. And a lot of people don't realize he helped me in the formative stages, just giving feedback. And my father, a lot of people don't know that my father, growing up, my father's first of all a practical joker. Now people see my father in a very super serious light, but I could tell you stories of practical jokes that he did and gave and so on. And the other thing was I was exposed to a lot of comedy when I was a child because my father made a concerted effort. He watched a lot of Sanford and Son. He watched the precursor to Sanford and Son, which is a British comedy called Steptoe and Son.
Okay.
My father watched a lot of. We watched things a lot. Like I learned British comedy in terms of the use of the pun. I learned American comedy was more brash, slapstick comedy, and all of these things. And there's actually a science to it, which I myself didn't know. Even in terms of St. Lucia, watching some of the other contemporaries like the legendary Cooks and so on, Carlton and others, just understanding that. But it was just, some people in their value system, you have families that are lawyers, you have families that are bakers, you have families that are singers. And I wouldn't say my family was political,
Mm-hmm.
right? Yes, you grew up, and I always use this analogy that while other people had ketchup and pepper on their table, that I had Labor UWP on my table every day, because my uncle, by not by blood, but my uncle, so John, and then you have my father's leader of the opposition. My grandfather was a founder of the United Workers' Party. As a matter of fact, the draft constitution of the United Workers' Party is still with my mother somewhere in the house
Wow.
there right now. And he was supposed to be the first leader, Sir Frederick Clark, before Sir John. And when he turned it down, he ended up being the first native governor. So I was always around. And my mother was a very active, my mother was an activist. My mother protested for teachers. My mother protested various causes and so on as a teacher. And my mother taught Mondidor and Gros Islet. And my mother taught people like Wally and Ancillary and down in Soufre. So
Wally the Calypsonian.
yep, Wally the Calypsonian and a number of other people. So, and these are the around the days of Mrs. Lake and Miss Box Hill and so on, Miss Yard, and the Anglican School and so on. So I was around all these things. But the true motivation for me for Lucians was two things. One, I had a daughter at 19, and you have this path. I thought I had all these preconceived things. I was in school in Canada. I figured I would come back and I would help in my father's businesses and all those things because I had done work in his brokerage company and real estate. Just trying to become oriented, but not any great deal of success. But I was up there, and I have my girlfriend. She got pregnant. She's having the child. And then I started to, in a sense, freak out in the sense that I knew what my parents did for me. And let me tell you, my parents, there's nothing, we may not have gotten everything that we wanted, but for sure we got everything that we needed. And for me, I always consider myself a product of advantage. What my father suffered, I never came anywhere close to that. So for me, I desperately wanted to do for my daughter what my parents did for me. And because at that time I'd only done 2 years of an associate's degree, the concept of school and everything. And my father told me something. He said, there are no unimportant times in a child's life. So for me, I wanted to be there. I didn't want to be one of those fellas say, "Oh, I went off to school. I came back after the child was 5," and that type of thing. So for me, I was said to myself, well, you owe it to yourself or to your daughter to try to do everything you can to make money. Now, the sad truth is that I didn't realize that maybe it was a subconscious excuse to try all these crazy things because I could have said, well, boy, go on, sit down and focus on accounting. But first of all, a lot of people may not know because I did MNC Fine Arts Awards and stuff like that, visual art. So since I was out of St. Mary's College and I was doing painting and drawing then, I did a lot of art and I went around trying to sell. I tried to sell to Tapio Hospital. I have art in government buildings, in NIC buildings. I have at Sagicor. I have when it was Barbados Mutual. I have the most I ever got for a painting was 1,500 US. But the problem with art is I had to be bringing my paintings up by the Donata School. There's a guy named Pato that was downstairs that was putting the frames. I had to physically carry them. The glass would break. I remember one time I had my paintings at Tapio for about 8 months, and every Tuesday I would have to go to try to collect my money. Get to town, take a bus, walk across town, reach for our show, take a bus, walk inside, and then they tell you, come next week, until they return the paintings. And my mother told me, you should charge them for rent. And on the way back, about 3 of the frames broke. I remember the problem with art is that you can sell 15 paintings in one day, and then you cannot get any more business for another year or 2. So I did that, and something also happened to me where I had a painting that was at NIC, and the financial controller there, he heard that Julian Hunt had come to collect his money for his painting, $1,000. And I desperately needed it because my daughter was out of Pampers. And I said, well, I didn't tell them Julian Hunt. It just came out that way because that's my first name.
Yeah.
And when I went, the guy came outside and he said, hey, yes, I thought it was your father that was there. That's the only reason you're getting paid now. And it taught me something. I said, wow. But the point was I challenged myself to do anything I could think of that I thought it wasn't even a matter whether I was good at it or talented, but I thought there was a market to try. So to go and sing, I'm not a vocalist, but then you find out that calypso is one of the genres that takes the least amount of vocal talent outside of rap, right? So, you know what? I remember being at a tennis court and we were quarreling about how lapo the fellas were. And the fella told me, well, why don't you go and do it? So I went and did it. And each time just going to do these things. Now, when I was in Canada, I saw something called Speaker's Corner, where they use the phone booth, and I don't even know if anybody knows what a phone booth is anymore. But people used to pay to go into this phone booth in Canada, and they would say whatever they wanted. They would bleep out the curses, but they would say whatever they wanted. And on Saturday on City TV, which is on cable now, you would see people just talking, saying whatever they wanted. And it always stuck with me. And then I said to myself, well, let's try this. And the major thing for me was, one, I wanted to see if I could create a revenue stream to offset the fact that I did not have a degree and I didn't have any big job. And I wanted to make money in terms of my daughter. But also, I suffered, like many St. Lucians and many people around the world, from pluralistic ignorance. And it is when you see something, it doesn't quite square off in your mind, but you don't say anything because other people might look at you and laugh, or they might think you're stupid. So for me, it's little things. My entire life I'm growing up, I don't know who the hell William Peter is.
Yeah.
Who is William Peter? And you think, well, boy, let me challenge myself because I'm going to expose that I am stupid or I am wrong, and hopefully when I do that, if I expose my own ignorance, it will then help with other people and just nationally generally. So I did the pilot episode, and we asked the part about the humor was just for the entertainment value. So the first question I have asked was, if a plane crashes between Martinique and St. Lucia, where do you bury the survivors? And nobody got it right. And the other thing was, when I was asking people in the William Peter Boulevard, who's William Peter, nobody knew. So all of a sudden, I'm like, wow, well, let's see how far this goes. And I remember Tiger Woods basically saying, like he was competing against himself because he was the first to do many things. Now, there were other great golfers, but not other great black golfers. So because sometimes when you're competing against yourself, you're the greatest competition because the only thing you have left is your conscience to tell you. And even the slavery of going on a Sunday and everybody loving the show, but you know what? You have to top yourself the next week. And if people didn't love the show, then you felt like complete crap because everybody had to top. You had to top yourself. You had to improve. And other shows like Seinfeld or the Cosby Show, or all people like Chris Rock and Dave Chappelle and all these people. These people have writers. They're writing teams for sitcoms. These people to plan out 16 episodes, which is a regular season, right? These people have to have whole boardrooms of people that write for them. And it was me, myself, and I get an idea from my mother, get an idea from my father, see something on the TV. And then eventually one of the guys that really helped me was still at DBS right now, Junior, Rick Waynor Jr., that guy, phenomenal guy, Michael Moses, right? He helped me tremendously because he was one of the few people that gave me ideas until the Looshans crew came into the politics. And those guys came with their own nuclear level of comedy on their own. But for me, it was self-exploration. So, for example, even as we speak, why do we say the shock school, right, is, and it's in Vide-Bouteille, right?
Yeah.
And the school in Laclery, it is now named...
Patricia D. James.
Right, Patricia James. That was called the Laclery School, right?
Yeah.
Why is the Laclery School in Vide-Bouteille, right? The shock school, the Laclery School was in shock. Even when you go around the roundabouts, for example, right now you go around the roundabouts, one arrow says, you have two arrows, straight and left, and you have straight and right. So which one do I take if I'm going straight? How many of us, you see, how many of us, for example, when you're going up by Wyndham side there, Marisil, know that lane on the left is for trucks? Do we know? The spellings for Mondidor. You have three different spellings for Mondidor. Which one is the right one? Mondudon? Mourne? Dudon? Which one? I'll give you another one. Cut that short. Oleon. Oleon? Auxleon?
That's what I know.
Auleon?
That's true.
If we say Vieux-Fort, why don't we say Castries? Now, I was taught that in order to chart a course, on a map, you needed 5 points of where the actual place you were going would be. But you also needed the sixth point, which was the point of origin, where you're starting from. So, for example, up to this day, and I stopped doing it about 3 years now, we still put ST. Why am I abbreviating my own country in my own home? So I write SAINT. But is it still right to say ST, or should we by now be projecting SAINT? We argue over the colors of the flag, cerulean blue. But I only learned in the last 6-7 years that the official color is not yellow. It's actually gold. The legal color is gold. Now people will come with the politics and say, da, 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 da. But there are those who wanted to stay yellow. But if another government came and started to walk it over to orange, you would see the kind of rage kind of thing right now. But why don't we ever get these things right? How come nobody has ever said, you know what? So let me tell you how it works in ridiculous levels. How many districts does St. Lucia have? I guarantee you cannot be right.
No, 11.
And the reason you cannot be right is not because you're wrong, but because there is no official answer. So let me give you the Ministry of Planning as 11, Ministry of Education has 9, Office of the Prime Minister has 10.
Wow.
Now, you will leave that and you say, no big deal. But when you hear that people will be applying for grants, right, to the World Bank, and when they put their basic background information about the country, their project gets delayed by 12 to 14 months because if they put 9, 11, or 10, they still can't know whether they get it right. It looks like an error in your background information. And I only know this because having worked in government for some 2 stints, I found that out firsthand. Projects delayed because we didn't have accurate information. We still, right now, do we reclaim land as land? Are we 238 or are we 240? Are we 240? Do we count coastal erosion? You know, these kinds of
recognition as well.
these kinds of things. What do we do when we have Pigeon Point now makes it? We up to now the debate Pigeon Point, Pigeon Island. How can we say Pigeon Island when it's now joined? Is it Pigeon Point? What do we, those kinds of things. And I feel like I'm in a country, I should know. Like, did you know Black Malay was a person?
Black Malay was a person?
I didn't know. I found that out in the last, and there's a play by, what's his name, by McDonald Dixon, right? Who I think I had hoped he could have been Governor General at some point. But he's a brilliant economist who's also a creative himself. But you see, we don't know the history. And when you talk about me, you might know the history, but the truth is there are people who, like McDonald Dixon, that did so many other things, Roderick Walcott and so on. But the point is, here is Black Malay, a placeless name. We don't know. He was a dark person who had the name Mallet. So Black Malay was the nickname, and it stuck.
Yeah.
How does that even work? And then people, we started to make fun of it, like Soufouye. Does that mean look wind hot? How do we play in terms of the patois and all of these things? So for me, it was a journey of self-exploration. And people always used to tell me, why don't you give the answers? Because a lot of people were just waiting for the answers, but the part that they were missing was they who were watching, who were laughing, didn't know. And what is the absolute right answer? Now, every so often you'd get somebody like a Gregor Williams, who's the greatest historian in St. Lucia's history, as far as I know, right? But we are losing a golden opportunity to get the pearls of information that he has.
Yeah.
But the point was that he would give an answer. So you'd hear, the Soufre volcano, and you hear Kuala Boo and all these things. But the truth is, for the general population, we didn't know. Now you've had in the last 3 years, I think the Minister for Education has said they're going to implement national history in schools. But the bottom line is we have an identity problem. So how do we chart a course forward if we don't know who we are, where we are, what we acknowledge or what we apologize for? When I was a child and growing up into my teens, a Negmawa was an insult.
Yeah.
To learn that it is something to be proud of, is a freedom fighter. How the history has reversed on us. People talk about what's his name, Derek Walcott being taught in schools. Rick Wayne always laments the fact it isn't taught in schools. When I was in college, it's Ismith Khan. Now, because my father was in politics, I was known as Hunt's son. I got to college. My eldest brother was in Form 5 and leaving. Bok was his nickname. I was Hunt's little brother. Then I had my other brother, Adrian, right? His nickname, because his initials were J-A-H, right? James Adrian Hunt, so Ja. So, right? And then it was Ja, little brother, right? So I never had my own identity. So the identity issue that I had, I didn't care if you call me idiot, asshole, jerk, dick, this, that, and the other. As long as you weren't calling me Hunt, because I was carving out who I was. And in that, Looshans became a natural extension once I was put down to the part where it's like, okay, so you have a daughter, you have to earn, and you need something that gives you some sort of tactical advantage. So the only thing you have going for you, you're not talented, you're not creative. What you are is willing to do it. So there's a little prize money, music, go. There's thing, do Looshans, and hopefully you'll get advertising and stuff like that. But that didn't work out in the way that I wanted it to, because people actually used to sponsor me, but they didn't want their ads in the show.
So they just sponsored you like anonymously?
Or better yet, they wanted you not to tell anybody, because they just like the show.
Yeah.
But it's a strange business model. And the problem was, to be chief cook and bottle washer, people wanted tapes, buying videotapes, putting on stickers, burning tapes, burning DVDs. Oh, I went to New York with DVDs. People asked me for bootleg of my own stuff.
Wow.
Yeah. T-shirts and everything. But all of these things, you can't both be writing the show, acting, directing, doing the things. And don't forget, this is a weekly show. So, and be honest, to get away with stuff like getting into the hospital, it was so, let me tell you, there's one thing that I've enjoyed is a richness of goodwill when I was doing that show. That people, whether it was security guards, whether it was ministers, whoever it was,
People
right?
by courts.
Yeah. The people by courts. I got on the bed. I thought I was going to be arrested. I said, boy, just, and they came and they were very nice. They said, you want an extra pillow, that type of a thing, right? Those kinds of things. And, you're in the middle of, people say it's like, in a phenomenon. But the truth was, you just were trying to see how far you could take it each time. How do you outdo yourself? And that is when you realize in life that you are competing only with yourself. Sir John said something when people thought he was crazy because he gave up the leadership to Von Lewis, and he said that was one of the few times he listened to people, and people said he didn't listen to anybody, but that's one time he shouldn't have. Biggest mistake that I made with Looshans, two things. One, I listened to people when they were saying that I was embarrassing the country, right? And I was offered cable access at the exact same time as Ali G. Ali G is Sacha Baron Cohen,
Yes.
right? Acclaimed actor now, multi-millionaire, and I'm sitting there talking to you, right? And I was offered cable access for £340, but I was dead broke and I couldn't raise the money anyway. But the point was, I didn't pursue it hard enough because I was always in that part where I felt like, are they right? Because 10,000 Frenchmen can't be wrong is the saying, right?
Yeah.
But here you are doing something that's never been done before. And you thought, I didn't think it was anything spectacular. Just go up with street vibes, do a couple skits. But it just tells you in St. Lucia what I loved was seeing that there were so many people who were like me, who just didn't know the answers to so many things.
Wow. Well, look, I see we have a comment here from Quincy February. He says Looshans was way ahead of its time.
I honestly thought that, I've seen some people do comedy, Desral and Shaq and so on have done stuff, but I thought that because I had already taken the literal licks for it. I go to the doctor now, and there's a clip where I poured liquid soap and I fell, and I would put a piece of wood behind my back to brace my back, but I fell on my arm. And to this day, this arm is still messed up.
Wow.
I have broken bones. I had to go for gastroscopy, ulcers. When you get hit, because St. Lucians don't act, right? So if you want to get it right, get it in one take. But believe me, when you see somebody hits you with a car, I know the difference between being hit with a sidekick, samurai, and being hit with a small, what they call a Chevy Cruze kind of a thing. And believe me, when you get up, when they tell the old saying is blay or cut, when you get up the next day and you're feeling, there was one skit, there were these, I don't know if it still happens today, kick for $1. These guys in town who would be like zombie fellas and they were on drugs or something like that, and people would give them $1 and to kick them. I saw a guy doing a headstand on a carnation tin for $1, and 3 lawyers were watching him and they were laughing their ass off. And I know the lawyers, and I watched it and I felt so sorry. I said, boy, let me go and mimic that skit. And I had my 2 guys, Roger and Tribunus Judah, to come and kick me right in front of Scotiabank, which is now the credit union. The guys, the first one kicked me, and when he kicked me, he ran for so far with his church shoes when he kicked me in my ass, right? The shoe stuck. I was so thankful that he missed my balls, because I always remember Bruce Lee killing a fella and Enter the Dragon by punching his balls. And I still had to wait for the second one. The second guy took runway, and when he think, and these are clips that I don't have anymore, the guy ran and he kicked me. He flew over me. He tumbled for about 10 feet, right? His shoe came off, everything. It is when I went home after Skitter's done and woke up next day, it's the first time I ever knew I had two assholes, right? I had a deep black mark that stayed for about a month and a half from that second kick being in the same exact spot as the first kick. And I was like, oh my God, but again, you do it in one take. Painful skit was, I wanted to do this thing, public awareness, because, I had a daughter, and it should not have taken me having a daughter to realize it, but that thing of sexual harassment and certain women. Because I've done it, it's been done when I had girls around me and stuff like that. I didn't really think of it that way. So I did a skit, certain women. So I said, psst, and the women would slap me. But every woman I went to was right-handed. And none of them knew how to fake slap. So they all hit me. And each and every one of them that hit me was hitting me straight on the side of my face and my ear.
Wow.
So I did it. I started on the morn. I went into town, and a lot of people didn't want to do it. But I finally got up to. By the time I reached up to the ramp, I had welts on my face.
On your face, wow.
And I know it sounds racist, but it's just growing up. I thought only white people got welts. So I had these big welts, and my hair was starting to do like the boxer's cauliflower hair. And I asked this other lady she was working at Spinnakers or whatever it was called back then, by the yacht club, and heavy set, dark woman. And the woman, I told her, do it with your left hand, please. And she didn't know how to control her left hand so much that she a straight cuff. And when that woman cuffed me, a little blood vessel in my eye just came, and I was like, whoa. And then I had to go back and tell her to get it properly, to do it with your right hand the original way. And when she did it the original way, boy, same thing, more pain. And I just got to a point where I just said, you know what, whatever it is I'm going to do, just do it in one take. And, you end up at the hospital for this, you end up at the hospital for that. And over time, now I look and I say, but look at that, all my friends aging well, and I look like I came out of a war. And I don't even know for what. All these different scars and burst this and burst that. There you go. But at the end of the day, it was probably the most fun job that I ever gave myself, I must admit.
Yeah, I must say you have a very interesting legacy, because what I remember growing up, I think it was every Sunday at 9 o'clock.
Yep.
Send them to bed, PG, send them to bed. I used to try to beg my mother, like, mommy, allow me. And all the skits that you did. And one thing you mentioned that pops out is the phone booth inspiration that you got from Canada. And the inquisitive nature that you have. Right now, I see guys like Daniel Loveless in Trinidad doing What You Know, which is basically what you did for Looshans, where you went up to people, smart, not smart, bougie, by the road, anybody, and you asked them a question. I remember even one time you went in front of the NIC building and you asked them, I think you stand up by the sign, and you asked them, what's the name of that building? And somebody's like, boy, I know.
Well, the worst part about the NIC buildings, and you see, these point to the greater problem. All of the questions that were unanswered or that exposed people. First thing, people used to tell me, oh, you're looking for stupid people. That's not what the problem was. You had people who were formally educated, but that doesn't mean they had the general knowledge about St. Lucia. So right now, what is the problem? Because I did the government buildings a number of times. And what do we refer to them as? The government buildings. Government buildings, And unless you're working in one, you don't know the names of them, even though they have the little busts on some of them or the name of the building. So everybody goes to government, and when you're looking for Inland Revenue, you're looking for Ministry of Education or whatever, NIC, what do? You go by a security, say, secure, where is Ministry of Tourism? We still do that up to today. And I went all these times, and we just continue in that ignorance. And for me, I felt, because in America you have totem poles and you have sign poles. But the idea for me was, why not use cultural heritage, creative industries, and take Moko Jumbies, the stilt walkers like we have, and put signage to say Inland Revenue there, Ministry of Tourism there, Ministry of Agriculture there. So that, and why don't we have at the bottom of at least the closest building to town, to the immediate part of Castries, a concierge desk, where if you want to be directed somewhere, you just go to that one central person and place to go and tell them to go here, go there, kind of a thing. So that was the point of getting those, like asking people, you know, like which building. And unless you worked in the building, most people didn't know. But that's part of our culture. We have a culture, and I'm not a culture of ignorance. I'm happy it's not so much, not as much anymore. But when I was growing up, I thought ignorance, the word ignorant, was a good thing. I'll tell you why.
Why?
Because people used to make fun of me because I didn't say oxygent and I didn't say nylon. There was a girl who once came to me and asked me if I was a white person because of the way that I spoke, because that is what she understood. She never had TV, but that was what she knew. In Anglican, I must have been about 8, 9 years old.
Wow.
Now, the point is, you have sorry, I lost my train of thought there.
Yeah.
You
You were talking about more or less your language.
right. So with regard, so in learning these things, in trying to understand these things, you found it like, okay, so you know, you had people coming to you and in school they would tell you different things, and you didn't understand and you didn't know. And then you have to ask yourself, and I am digressing, but what defines St. Lucia? For example, I had people, do you know that we say we're introducing Creole into schools, right? Patois. Now we call it Patois, and we don't even know. We thought we were the only people, like I got to Canada at 19, thinking we were the only people that used the word Patois.
True.
And then when I got to Canada, and people say, do you speak Jamaican Patois? And then I'm like, oh crap, so everybody has a patois. But that, and yeah, you could say I'm stupid, but I'm sure I'm not the only person like that.
Yeah.
So now we say you speak the Creole, you know, the French Creole patois, the Francophone countries, we do that.
Yeah.
But the point of it was that we did not understand in terms of ourselves. Imagine half of St. Lucia's population doesn't understand the other half. That doesn't happen. Imagine China has no one official language. They have 5 major dialects and hundreds of others, right? India has hundreds of languages. There are 250,000 villages in India, right? But here we are at St. Lucia, 184,000 people, and half of us don't understand the other half. And we say the ones that speak in patois are the ignorant ones.
Yeah.
That doesn't make any sense, right? My father did not speak patois because you got beaten when you spoke patois. He was going into politics and public life. He learned patois. He would ask people to speak to him only in patois, to become fully conversant in patois, right? You can say Creole, whatever you want. But the point is that we know, I mean, think about certain things that we have in St. Lucia. Why is it, and Jerry George, journalist extraordinaire, is the one that said that, why is it that Creole is predominantly an early morning and an after dark language in the media?
Yeah.
Why is it Yadi and them will come first thing in the morning at Jukwa, and then after nighttime, then you'll hear first on radio in Creole, but in the daytime, middle of the day, why?
No Creole. Hardly any Creole.
Hardly. And if it is, it's supported with a translation, right? Why do we pander to the people like me that were raised not speaking patois, right? And the person is ignorant because they don't speak English, because people speak English around the world. All the countries that speak English, like I was very surprised to see the level of English in Europe in terms of Ukrainians and stuff like that.
Oh, wow.
But the truth is, the average European, right, speaks, over 60% of them speak more than one language. So French speak a little bit of English, German speak a little bit of English, and like there you go. But here we are in St. Lucia, we don't want to speak a little bit of patois. And look at things that we say that we don't even realize. Give an example. You go down to Dennery now, Dennery South, and you go to the Daito. I grew up thinking Daito was patois.
That's not a patois word?
Daito is the letters from the Japanese company that built the facility.
Wow.
So that's why we call it Daito. So give you another one. In St. Lucia, we say Baba Green. We one of the few countries say, people say asphalt, people say bitumen, people say tarmac. People don't say Baba Green. Why do you say Baba Green? When Sir John was building the Grosley Highway, the machine that the fellas were using to pave the road was named Baba Green, just like you have John Deere or you'll have Toyota or whatever. And these types of things and how they factored in, you know, even for example, what's a curse? So if I am Dr. Bird, who was my daughter's pediatrician, and you go in and you be your community nurse, right? And you go around the coast. If I am talking in Creole, French Creole, to somebody who doesn't speak English, and I'm trying to diagnose a vaginal infection as a doctor, for a child, what word do I use? What is the word?
Ha.
For a child is kokot.
Yes.
And for somebody who's past puberty is cocoon. Am I cursing? Right? That's why I've never had the issue that other people have with isalop. It's a word that evolved. Michael Jackson took bad and made bad good. Right now you have a nuclear thing which distinguishes us at cricket, which people love because it never gets old. You can do it when the person is bowling, when the person is batting, somebody falls, somebody hits a six, somebody does anything, and you have it. It doesn't tire out. It doesn't have a super specific meaning. But because we have this, sadly, a colonial vestige, a culture of apology, right? We never get past these things. So you said something which I've heard people say before, the smart people or whatever. No, we're all in the same boat. If in definition, you know, you have people with PhDs in St. Lucia who don't speak patois. So that means you cannot communicate with your own people who you grew up with, right? I've never gotten to the point of speaking fluent patois. I feel bad about that, and I keep working at it, right? And then there are people who don't speak great English. You know how we pronounce things, our accent and stuff like that. Is it Agatha or Agatha? Is my name, Christopher or Christopher, right? So I don't know, but I think it's something that needs to be not only duplicated. I think because I lost a lot of the footage was lost in two ways. The first was the Hurricane Thomas flooded out my apartment, and I had stuff on DVDs and digital video and stuff like that.
Wow.
And believe me, my dog was swimming in my yard when I opened the door. I was the vehicle. I was the vehicle that got across the Union Bridge before the Burgundy CRV that got stuck in it. I literally overtook that vehicle in the rain with my dog in the back, crossing that. And when I went down in that, it was like Chuck Norris. The water was above my windshield, and I just pressed it. I floored it, and I just magically came up out of that. And believe me, when I tell you, I lost half of the footage in that. And the other problem is, when you put things on DVD, on high 8 tapes, on VHS, they degrade. And even if you want to vacuum seal them and put them in boxes, they still degrade. Yeah. So the part where you lose those things. So that's why for me, I was hoping people would come up and redo the skits, you know, just like people remake songs. There are a number of skits that I want to redo. Like we had a skit called "Do Dig Nothing," where you pay a grave digger and he asks you for $100, but you only give him 50, and you tell him, well, just hold that, don't dig nothing. And then the day of the funeral, you come with the body, and when you get there with the body, right, the grave isn't dug, so you say, well, I said, what happened to you? I gave you $50. Yeah, but you tell me don't dig nothing. Yeah, you know, simple jokes, but just, you know, even for example, like, you know, just watch my car for me. We had a clip in Lac Larry where we had the guys completely strip a car. Right? When they stripped the car, he said, but I guess I told you watch my car for me. Say, yeah, I watched the car and I watched the fellas stripping the car. Now, is that hugely funny? Not necessarily, but the bottom line is it'd be good to have it at least curated. Because if there's one thing that I envy about Chekapesh is that you have the videos for posterity. Yeah. And that part hurts. That part really hurts.
Yeah, man. Trust me, I sure I echo a lot of your Looshans fans, because I mean I go through some of the clippings on social media, and even the Christmas special you did some years back. And there's just a wide call for it. I think that's one of the most authentic pieces of Lucian comedy in that era. And when you compare it to what's happening now, and I mean it's not a jab at any particular comedian, but some of the things that I see now, I look at the level of effort with Lucians, particularly when you, and that's something I want to go into. When you did your impersonations, what was your feedback? And one of the impersonations that really stuck out to me was Muffy Olion.
Okay, so
Yeah.
the thing is, you never knew whether you were doing the impersonations right. There are some great comedians online who will teach you how to impersonate people. The first thing is that for me, again, because I grew up in a family where I watched a lot of comedy,
Yeah.
I remember not being allowed to listen to Eddie Murphy when he first came with his first comedy special, and it was actually on tape. And my eldest brother had a boombox, and it played night after night, and I had to stay in the hallway and listen through the door to hear the jokes. Right now, for me, in terms of comedy interest, the thing that I have a memory which, and my family, my grandmother lived to 96, and she didn't just remember she didn't just remember years, she remembered days and dates. So she could tell you it was Monday afternoon, 1975, September 20th, she stopped eating tomatoes, like that. And I know that date, September thing, because she actually said that. But I could remember my earliest memory was to the crib. Now, I remember making a joke once to my two brothers, and my brother saying, when I thought it was funny, so I tried to repeat it. And when I tried to repeat the joke, I couldn't. He said it's not funny the second time.
Yeah.
And that stuck with me. And up to this day, I still try to remember what the actual joke was. Right? But when it came to doing impersonations, first of all, I didn't know who I could get to impersonate people for me. And I never knew whether I was doing a good job. But exactly what you said, try to make the effort. If
Yeah.
I was going to imitate a woman, I knew that it meant I had to plan out my skits if I wanted to shave my mustache or shave my beard. If I was going to do Dennis Springer, I knew I had to shave to give myself a bald head. And the amount of people who didn't know I was walking around town with all of the thing shaved and the little rat island, we used to call it, little tuft of hair, and I had a cap on and I'm going around like it's nothing. When I had to do Glenn Duffy Oleon and all of these things, the problem was that in order to get my complexion dark enough, I didn't have makeup. So I had to use shoe polish. Now, the problem with shoe polish is it has alcohol in it. So the entire time you have it on, it's burning you. And when I say burning you, it's like if you have Dettol and you pour Dettol on your balls or something, right, on open wound, and you just, so all the time I'm in pain, I'm doing it. And the other thing too is you can wash your face 500 times. It doesn't come out because it's in your pores.
Yeah.
So every time I went to sleep afterward, the next day I would get up and that pillowcase was useless.
Black.
Right? Jet black. Now that caused problems with me and Timothy because I was borrowing some of Timothy's suits and I was ending up getting them dirty because I didn't have enough suits. Right? But the effort was there. And even, for example, we didn't have wigs. So I used to go into the barber shop by Meg's and by Colide and all of these fellas in town. And I used to take people's hair when they cut their hair on the ground. I used to put it in nylon bags and I used to glue it to my head. Now, that's not so bad, but the problem with that is people have different ways of caring for their hair. So if you get hair of dandruff, if you get hair of sweat, book, right?
Yeah.
And you get that and you have that. Now, when you see you put in a mustache,
Yeah.
the illustrious Vellon John, one of St. Lucia's greatest sons,
Of course.
when I had to imitate him and I had to put the mustache and give myself the goatee, and the whole time the thing is smelling like hell, but you have no choice. Kenny Anthony knows I don't have a fine nose. So when I put the plasticine to do a paw impersonation, how was I holding it up? Now I knew that crazy glue, if it got in your eye, you went blind. So I had to carefully put it and make sure that it never ran into my eyes to hold up the weight of the plasticine.
Wow.
And then eventually my mom, when she traveled, she helped. She got little makeup. I got little masks. I got little bits and things. I would get block heels from women so I could do women's skits and dresses and stuff like that. I mean, as a man, boy, I can tell you to wear a thong, that is borderline castration. Every step you take in something is trying to cut something off, you know. But the point was, again, you're competing with yourself, so you're just doing whatever, you know. And the empowering feeling about it was that, like I said, no matter how good you did, the show was great. The show was great. By the time you reach the third quarter of the show, the third segment, I'm already like, oh shit, what do I do now? What do I do next? And it's not something I couldn't depend. I was started off depending on the news cycle to give me things to piggyback off of. And then it turned around where the news cycle was waiting to see what I did. And then they would follow what I was doing. So after a while, it became even more difficult to get stuff done.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
Okay. Well, one of the things you said you borrowed Timothy's suits. So he was in on the fact that you were going to impersonate him?
At the beginning, because you may not know, there was a skit we did as a promo where Timothy was presenting the news and I was sitting down next to him with KFC. And as soon as he went to break, I said, Tim, you want some fries or whatever, right? And, he said, ah. And he started off in good spirits. And then over time, I could understand why he got frustrated, because at the end of the day, the suits, even if they sponsored or whatever, that's what the man is using. But it wasn't intentional in that sense. It's just like with Rick Wayne. I mean, I call him Uncle Rick to this day, and we speak all the time. We disagree a lot, but we have a wonderful relationship. We agree to disagree. And he is somebody I desperately think, because his mind is still on. The man is 88, and he looks like he's in his 60s.
Oh, wow.
And this man, I believe we need to get a documentary done, because I believe that could be a Netflix type documentary. And like I said, his mind is still, he's on, he's there, he's good, he remembers everything, he knows. I mean, you can hear him calling every day, kind of a thing. But Rick used to get upset, because the thing about Rick was he could give jokes, but his jokes were normally crass and very insultive. People like Pele and so on, he very insultive. But he couldn't take jokes.
He couldn't take it.
Now, every time I made fun of him, because he was a person that I imitated from the time I was a kid, because when I was a kid, when he came to my home, he brought me a Arnold Schwarzenegger signed poster.
Oh, wow.
Right? And all of these things, when Terminator was just coming out and all of these things.
Yeah.
And when I imitated him, he would get upset. But after a while, he realized every time he got more upset, I just made more fun of him. And all the politicians that got upset, I just made more fun of them. And the people who understood it, like my father, because I made fun of my father as well. Sir John understood it perfectly, and others. But there were those that they didn't get it. And especially when it got to election time, everybody's like, boy, you can't. Then it gets super serious. Then people start throwing stones in your window. You get your death threats and all the rest of that type of stuff from all sides. So it is what it is.
Wow. You see, people who didn't even... I would never imagine you would get threats over that.
Well, I've gotten death threats. No, here's the funny thing. For Looshans, there are a lot of people who find stuff funny when you're making... If I'm making fun of you, you find it... like the other person that's next to you finds it funny. You're pissed off. You're threatening to sue me.
Yeah.
You want to send lawyer's letter. You threaten the station, this, that, and the other. The next week, I go and make fun of somebody else. You're laughing. You forget that you had a... The truth is, I was threatened with a lot of lawsuits. I never got one lawsuit from doing Looshans.
Wow.
But if you ask me if I got threats all the time, and even in terms of when it got to politics, in terms of in general, I mean, my daughter doesn't live with me primarily because I remember a politician asked me, don't you have security? Where I get money to afford security? But the bottom line is, my daughter doesn't live with me primarily because of the threats to me. And in terms of my parents, there was one guy politically in the last election cycle, right? I call him KK Arsehole, right? He actually called for my mother to be pulled out of the house, right? And raped and beaten, right? In defense of Shasney. That was, and what he does, being the asshole that he is, he just says, oh, I'm just joking. That's just comedy. No, bro.
Yeah, that's not.
Exactly. But the bottom line is, it's something that I've lived with my whole life. So you know, you stay and you think about, after a while you just say, look, somebody really wants to kill you. You never heard St. Lucian say this saying, guys, anywhere I see that man, I take it that man. If you really want to find somebody, you go to their home and you get them.
Yeah.
So if somebody really wants to kill me, there's nothing I can really do. Hopefully I can get in a jab or two, but there's not that much I can do. So you just live with it.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow. Now you said quite a bit.
Too much.
Not definitely not. I think for all of us, it's a real eye opener, and I think it shows the dark side of comedy. Like, yeah, there's the light side of it, which is what you produce. Everybody laughs, ha ha ha, we share it. But then the backstory and how people feel, how people react. Because you mentioned Dr. John. I was fortunate to have a sit down with him a few, maybe like 2 weeks ago. And he really surprised me that, at his age, because he's 83 now, he sits on his bed and he does a lot of note taking. And he showed me a book. And the heading of that book was Politically Incorrect. And he showed all the notes from that show. And he said he had every single show. That's what he does on his bed. So I do think in all what transpired there, you still have you have a tremendous amount of respect from people who may not overtly say it, but I think your legacy really speaks to that.
Well, in terms of Velan John, I mean, when I did meet him, and there were times when he made an effort to meet with me, which I really appreciated, and knowing that I did take jabs at him, because I remember Tom Walker telling me and Rick Wayne that even when Velan John was in college, while other fellas used to go outside to play sports, he was just, they call him lexicon, because he was just eating dictionaries kind of a thing. And when that man's CV, when you go in even his book and you read the CV and you see this at Thunder Bay and that and this and that and the other, yeah, boy, it's a Bible in and of itself. But the fact that he actually for me, the fact that he did not take it personally, I remember the part where I took a dictionary and I turned it sideways like a Playboy centerfold. And people say, boy, mate's going to get... And he was cool. And not only politically incorrect, but also revolution later on. The point is, I don't think St. Lucians are appreciating a man who we understand he's in his twilight. But the fact of the matter is, I don't think St. Lucians truly understood or took advantage of his talent. And the problem is, that's been said too much about St. Lucia. St. Lucia has a funny way of taking you from being the future to being the past tense without giving you a present. So what happens is people say, boy, you're young, you're too young. You're in your teens, you're too young, you're 28 to 29. When you reach 30, they just don't tell you anything.
Yeah.
And then when you see you reach 35, they just start telling you, Gasa, you better get serious about it. And you never got that moment, you never got that time. And that sweet spot where whether you are a professional athlete in the States or you're a singer, you have that moment. There was a time when it was Neo. There's a time when it's Drake. There's a time when it's Kendrick Lamar. In St. Lucia, boy, let me tell you, you Alpha or you Arthur, things that you don't even realize, the patterns that we have. I wrote an article about it once. Once somebody does anything 3 times in St. Lucia, we start to resent them.
Wow.
Right? Think about the people. Think about things. For example, if I want people to reinvent me politically, I just have to wait 3 years in the wilderness. We reenact messianic politics and messianic things. Alpha goes away, he comes back. Yeah. He wins. We can't wait for the day when Carnival come. They're robbing her black, but he's still participating. He stay out for 3 years, when he come back, he win. Right? We repeat certain patterns as St. Lucians. Right? We have politicians. Let me tell you something. If I could have taken Mario Michel off the bench and brought him back in terms of the last election, we would have had to invent seats. It would have been 19-2, that kind of a thing, right? Not because Mario Michel was necessarily Barack Obama or whoever you want to put, Hunter Francois, whatever. But the bottom line was, we have patterns of behavior in terms of St. Lucia. And the thing about it is funny when you see those patterns, we see a woman fall, an elderly lady, we say, Isalo. And then we go help the woman, and we quarreling with all the people that said Isalop, even though we were the ones saying Isalop.
Yeah.
You know, those little things. But the thing is, our idiosyncrasies are what make us who we are. I went to Taiwan. I had the privilege. I was invited to go to Taiwan. And can you imagine, this does not mean come here.
What does mean?
That means you're in trouble.
Oh, wow.
Do you know what this means? Come here.
That's what means.
This means come here in Taiwan.
Wow.
I couldn't believe it. And then little things, for example, a country with 23 million people, but they consider themselves to be a tiny island. Now they are an island, and 23 million people is like, what? That's the size of Toronto and plus and other provinces, right?
Yeah.
But you know what? They are comparing themselves to China.
China.
You see? So everything is relative, and then from there you start to realize. But what I think the greatest thing that's happened in St. Lucia, we've been cursed by ignorance in the sense that, oh yes, that was the point. They're cursed by ignorance in that when I was growing up, people used to say, "That's I'm an ignorant fella, you know." One thing about ignorant fella, ignorant meant that you had pride, you were authoritarian, you're willing to fight. So the fighting spirit. I'm an ignorant fella. But I'm so happy that I believe, whether it's Julian Alfred, whether it's the athletes now, whether it's the Denry segment fellas, I think a lot of the people that have succeeded in St. Lucia, don't get me wrong, I give Twatine his credit, I give Sean Edward as Minister for Sports his credit, and so on and so forth. But in St. Lucia, you don't succeed because of St. Lucia, you succeed in spite of St. Lucia.
In spite of.
Yeah, because we have a guillotine society. Right? If you making $3 million and I'm making $1 million and we both have the same boss, I go into your boss, I say, "Boss, I rather you don't pay me for you not to pay that man." Right? That's how we are. We cut each other down. Now, we're getting to that point. We're getting to the point where people are overcoming that because a lot of young people ignored these things. When people say, "Oh, the young people ignore politics," I don't blame them. When people say that young people, because they can see something, because they're not trapped with the scar tissue. When they said Barack Obama succeeded where Jesse Jackson and others didn't, because he didn't have the pain of the civil rights movement, he was born just after that. It's the same thing in St. Lucia for those who are achieving now. They're achieving now because they are not hamstrung by, you're a Compton man, you're a Kenny man, that kind of a thing. They're not hamstrung because we don't have national history, but we have at least 80 years of political history. So we associate it with familial loyalty. We associate it with this, with that, with the other. You know, when people tell you, for example, I am Labour because my family is, how can that be a justification? Or I'm Labour because I'm from Labrie. Or I'm UWP because I'm from Miku. And my father was UWP and he was, and we've come.
Chef Lobo.
How people burying themselves. Let me ask you a question.
Yes.
With politics, just dabble.
Right.
What's the first color of the Labour Party?
Boy. Was it yellow?
Nope. Blue.
Blue. Right.
Blue. Right? So you're going to die for red? You have it on your grave? Right? What was the first symbol of the Labour Party?
Was it an axe?
A teacup.
A teacup.
What's the first color of the UWP?
UWP was red.
There you go. And you want to fight? You want to die over these things? Right? So, but I understand that it goes deeper than just the symbolism. But the point is, still we keep repeating all of these patterns as a country. Now, if you don't have that clear course, for example, we have not had any party have 2 terms since 2006. So now people no longer vote governments in, they vote them out. Every election is a change election. Even if you're in office, incumbency is a crime. It's a disadvantage now. It used to be an advantage.
That's what I was about to say.
Yep. It's a disadvantage now because we're in an instant social media thing where we don't have the tolerance and the patience. The days of leaders for 30 years, and I agree, there shouldn't be no 30-year leader, 40-year leader kind of a thing. Those days are over. Although Trump going for a 3rd term. But no, don't laugh.
Wish him all the best.
It'll happen, right? As long as the people that he has behind him, it can happen. But my point is that we don't, for example, where do we see St. Lucia positioned by the year 2050? Right? we Africa is on the rise. The Caribbean is estimated to be the poorest region, will be the poorest region in the world by the year 2050.
Okay.
Where are we positioning ourselves? Sometimes I think to myself, we had England as our mother. Our mother kicked us out of the house. Do we sit down on the step and cry, or do we get up and go and get a job and get an apartment and do something? But what is that something? We say tourism to an extent, but how many hotels? You have one side telling you, Shastin telling you, they want 5,000 hotel rooms, this, that, and the other, right? But do you realize the conditions that a lot of the people in the hotels are working under? How they are treated? How, what's it Derek Walcott said? All we did was take the plantations and put them by the sea.
Yeah.
So are these the answers? That's why I personally love Airbnbs, and I love to hear there's an Airbnb in PI and all of these places, because at least then that is something that in a strange way, George Odlum was actually the one who was talking about that, not having formal tourism, but having people come to stay at cottages and villas and so on that you built. But the question is, where are we going? Where exactly do we want to be? So this government has done well in terms of the economy and all the rest of that. But the point is, what's the vision for 40 years down the line, right? I like the idea of the sovereign wealth fund, but more importantly, my point is, your generation, and the truth is, your generation is already moving into past tense. Because how old are you now? You're
31.
You're 31. In St. Lucia, you're still too young. How stupid is that? You have people who are prime ministers of countries, they tell you, you're too young. But yet you've seen fellas become multimillionaires, right? People don't, because achievement does not discriminate except hair, right? And the truth is, from the time you reaching over 19, you had to know where you're going. But in St. Lucia, culturally, we have fellas with BMWs and Audis still living by their mother.
Yeah.
Right? So the question is, these kinds of quirks that we have as a people. And for me, whether it was Looshans or in general, I just feel like it's better to just call out these quirks, and then after you call out these quirks, then maybe we can establish how we move on. So for example, for me, I've made a personal determination. I do not write ST. It doesn't take me 5 more seconds to write SAINT, and I put St. Lucia unless it's some international thing, like where you put JFK for the airport, and they tell you put SLU, then I can understand. But if I'm writing something to you, even if I'm texting, I give myself those habits. And I'm constantly trying to establish certain things, at least in my own reality.
Okay. Well, now that you touched on the youth and the politics, what was your experience with the staff party? Because I would remember back in the day, I saw it as satire, especially on the heels of an election where you had a majority in the House, then you have an opposition that was going through leaders because John Compton had left. And, there was just a lot happening politically. What was your experience like with that?
Well, I have to go back a little bit further. When I was even as young as 12, 14, one of my father's childhood friends would see me whether I was going to play basketball or football or whatever, standing by the road, hiking or taking bus, was Cabinet Secretary Emeritus Victor Girard.
Okay.
And from the time I was a little boy, I was always looking for solutions for some of the things that I saw. For example, we have a Westminster system of government. And imagine, Parliament does not recognize parties.
Yeah.
Just imagine, for example, let's take it to a hyperbolic level. Just imagine if you had to close your eyes, or if you were deaf and Parliament was on. The fact that Parliament is constructed but doesn't recognize parties immediately disenfranchises the whole system and the whole country, because we don't recognize parties. And we used to talk about things like places in the Netherlands. Mr. Gerard would tell, and I went and checked it out, places in the Netherlands where there were no party states, or places where you had proportional representation, which my father has been a proponent of, right? All of these different systems now. People say, why don't we go to an American system? Well, look at how the American system has its own bottlenecks. And I'm not saying they won't have bottlenecks, but I would challenge young people, not so they get into go and join a party and then become a candidate, become a minister, and then they almost like they force ripe and become old before their time kind of a thing. but think in different dimensions of what could be in terms of political systems and so on. I started to do a staff party because we were just making fun to get things, to get them to change certain things. And then they just, to be honest with you, both sides just shat on us. It's like, So like, oh, you're not taking us seriously. All we have to do is pay $250 deposit. That's $500 now. $250 deposit, and we'll go and do it for real. And for me, I was prepared because, like I said, I've been socialized in that my whole time. I always say I'm like the blade of politics, in the sense that I'm not a vampire, I'm not human, I'm a hybrid of the two. So I'm not Labour, not UWP. I have worked with both parties, whether people believe it or not. I have spent considerable amount of time with my father's main adversary, Sir John. I was even asked to run Castries Central before Richard Frederick ended up running it. I've been asked by the Labour Party to run seats like Castries South and Grosley at different points in time. But bottom line was, I was just trying to use the satire to make the points. They were not taking us on. So we said, well, we'll continue and then we'll go formal. We go formal, and then all of a sudden, lawyers' letter left, right, and center start coming. Letters, phone calls, threats. I had a guy that he got fired because he was running a seat. He got about 36 votes, right? He got fired, and the same letter that fired him was on the second page was a letter of recommendation, right? Had guys getting, like I said, objects thrown into their house. One got a shovel thrown into his house. You know what it takes to aim, send a projectile in, stones, all of these kinds of things, right? All kinds of stuff. People were trying to see if they could have poisoned me with some kind of all I know, it looked like oil, like oil from an engine and stuff like that. And it got really intense. And I was very happy that the people who understood it, besides my father, were people like Sir John, who encouraged people to come to the meeting in the boulevard and stuff like that. But even then, the point was missed. And the point was not missed on the public. The point was missed on the political directorate on both sides. And it's missed so much that up to this day, you still see some of the crap of it right now. Give you an example. I have a budget. I'm going to pay for buses. I'm going to buy T-shirts. I'm going to pay for drinks and food. And I'm going to pay for people who already support me to get on those buses, come to a venue, get out of the vehicle, walk around, share everything. And then I'm going to go on a stage with all those people that I essentially paid to come. Yeah. Others came because bandwagoners, it's a lime, it's a whatever. Water. And I go and say, Mama, look at people. And you know the worst part about it is, when I do that, I don't even mind if it was stagecraft. But I'll actually go and sit down with my other members of my party executive and say, boy, look at the amount of people. Isn't that psychological masturbation? Right? You creating something and then you trying and pat yourself on the back for something that you invented. Yeah. I used to tell the artists when we were doing things like Tempest, R. Kelly and what's his name, and LL Cool J, those guys, their brand was sex symbol, like Teddy Pendergrass. Yeah. Everybody could believe you're a sex symbol, but the one person that's not supposed to believe you're a sex symbol is you, right? Then you start tripping. And that happens a lot with artists or people who get into public life, myself included. But I'm just saying that in politics, it's amazing. The amount of people, first of all, there are too many people who take themselves too seriously in politics. There's others who don't take people seriously enough. And right now, because there's something called, in the age of social media, called the Hawthorne effect. Okay. Simplest way to describe it is, people, I don't know if you remember, there was one time a young lady was at jazz and they brought her on stage and the artist was trying to romance her on stage and perform for her. And the girl had her phone in her hand and she's like, girl, if you see them there. And she's on stage and everybody's around. Do you know why that is? Because now everybody's become performative more than genuine. So now people go to a fete. The fete flopping, but they having a great time. They're faking it on a boat ride with 5 fellas and like that kind of a thing. Mailbox, that kind of a thing. But the point is, you have to fake it. You have your selfie face. Children now know, as soon as the parent holds them and just does that, the child already had their face. They know their good side. They know all of that, right? But it is in terms of politics now, we no longer care about if somebody is genuine. We care about the show. We care about the entertainment value. A lot of people don't realize with Trump, right? Even though it's a guilty pleasure, we hate Trump, but we love to hate Trump. That's why he won. That's part of the reason why he won, because in today's world of social media, good is entertaining, no matter how bad it is. Somebody getting shot, stabbed. Gotta look at that man by the road, guy. Oh, God, oh, God. And then the worst thing you can be in today's world of social media is boring. You can be good. You can be giving out to the poor. You can be helping the elderly. You can be doing whatever. But if you're not charismatic and you're boring, people feel something ain't right. But you're the biggest asshole. And that biggest asshole is entertaining like Trump. And now that's how the value systems have changed. So, for example, you and your madam will go out to dinner. You would never take a magazine, go and sit down at Memories of Hong Kong or Big Chef or wherever, and pull out the magazine and read it. But you will not go through an hour and you or her will not check your phones. Right? That's the way things have changed. And in politics, instead of looking for people who are sincere, we've reached a point now where we just want the person who's the most entertaining, even though we know that they're full of shit. And for me, that's the part I don't get. For me, if I were to like going into the politics, my thing was I knew what I could do with the staff party, but I actually had to diffuse it because the guys were so scared, right? Gary DeVoe broke his arm. He went over to Martinique. He ran Grosley. He still got 42 votes, right? We had campaign finance was $6. And when I say campaign finance, not because anybody, we just happened to have $6 the one night we were out. And we bought, and you could still buy Van Turkey. We bought Van Turkey, 350 Van Turkey to share 4 fellas. 350 Van Turkey and a Coke that we shared, right? And for me, I got 97 votes on $6 campaign finance. I didn't do any house to house. I obviously did not spend the money that we had on the campaign, right? We did that one meeting where people gave sound, stage, lights, everything sponsored, just because it was, and people use that term loosely, they say a movement. Well, it felt like a movement at the time. But people come and they say, Gaza, why you Gaza, and they tell you on Facebook and stuff, Gaza, why you supporting that government, this, that, and the other, you how they treat your father, and they come with all of that. But they don't realize my father was even in government when I had the staff party. I started off I was using his vehicle, and then it became a thing where it was awkward in that sense, so I left his vehicle for him, right? But the point is, I did it. Other people can say, right now, do you know that there's a party in England and in Canada? There's a raving loony party in England, and there's another one I've forgotten the name of in Canada that are modeled after the staff party.
Oh, they're modeled after the staff party?
After the staff party.
Wow.
So sometimes you do things that you didn't even know. But there you go, and here you have it now. But the problem is now, a staff party wouldn't make any sense for one simple reason. These guys are doing so much shit, and I will say it as I mean it, particularly the current opposition. It's so much comedy in what they're doing, right? Now, I take them seriously, but the point is there's so many things that are crap, right? That I don't know if I could out-crap some people, if I could put it that way. Yeah. So you take these things and you say to yourself, if I gave you a choice with regard to this show, would you rather do it and end prematurely, right? Or would you rather overstay your welcome? If those are the only two choices. And knowing that, I rather end prematurely, knowing that it wasn't because of me. I didn't own a TV station. DBS and I had a love-hate relationship. There were times when, Linda Dahe, I think she did so much to help me, Junior and all of these people. But at the same time, I was going through growing pains with regard to the show. And the sponsors, and there were so many people. And look, I'm not going to pretend that there are not major portions of these things that I was and still am an asshole, right? But the bottom line was, again, you're experimenting and you don't know, you don't have a precedent to follow. The closest I could find was Oliver at Large. Totally different type of comedy, sketch comedy. When I looked at Shekapesh, Chekapesh did not go after politicians. They still don't. They go after St. Lucian stereotypes of fisherman, a farmer, average St. Lucian. They didn't go after. I mean, when I thought about it, I look back and I said, boy, I went on set and I brought Mario Michel nicotine gum because back then he used to smoke. He laughed. He took it in good spirits. But I said, you know how dangerous that was at the time?
Yeah.
Going into police. I went into police stations and used their jail cells. I went into Victoria Hospital when it was still Victoria Hospital.
Yeah.
I used the beds. I used the stethoscope and borrowed some of the stuff there. I mean, we got away with a lot. And to be honest with you, I wouldn't get away with it now, I don't think.
For sure.
Yep.
For sure. It's interesting you speak about the party because I think I read about it in that book, The Political Animal. I read about the Raving Looney Party. But I didn't know that was inspired by the
Let me
Stuff
tell you,
Party.
things
Wow.
that I didn't know. When my father, somebody told me that I was on the CIA and FBI's persons of interest list.
Really?
So I stay there and I'm in St. Lucia. I say, so wait, so if I am by naked jogging, they have satellites focusing on me there now. And I said, I messaged my father. That was time we still had BlackBerry Messenger.
Yeah.
And I messaged my father. I said, Daddy is actually, he was president of UN at the time. And he went and he found out it's true. And the truth is, once you have anything, there's a political organization. And it shows you how much I underestimated how seriously people took political organizations. That to this day, up to now, I still get electoral results mailed to me from electoral department,
Okay.
Yeah. My party is registered. I had a symbol. We did something.
As a bottle.
The bottle, yeah. And Gary came up with the name. I look for staff party because every country all over the world, it could be Putin, there's a staff party somewhere, right? Every company has a staff party.
Okay.
But Gary was the one who was sutut apwe fet fini kind of a thing and gave it the acronym and all that. But that was the point. It's just ideas. Any ideas, any vibes. And that, for me, even the part where we were being so persecuted, I love the part where you can look at history now and you hear people singing and people singing along with, a damn proud Lushan.
Oh, yes.
Now, the beautiful thing about that is people now say it with a demonstrative pride. Damn proud. I'm not just proud, I'm damn proud. But nobody, even the people that sing it or say it, know what the original intent of damn proud Lushan was when I started saying it and when we made the song about it. But it was a matter of being so. Let me tell you, I got thrown out of an apartment for the staff party, right? Lady came up, she put a spider sticker on my door. And imagine Spider at the time actually shook my hand with nomination day.
Okay.
But the lady was so vexed. She slapped a spider sticker on her. She said, I want you out of my apartment.
Wow.
And I didn't even know I had rights to stay, but I didn't feel comfortable, so I left, right? But I stayed, and the truth is, people talk about St. Lucian pride, but it's not the pride. Pride is not when Julian Alfred
does
wins.
well.
It's not when she wins. It's when St. Lucia comes 4 out of 4 or 8 out of 8. It's when St. Lucia's down. When I was a boy, Stephenson King was Minister for Sports, and it was until this last year, 2024, the most successful St. Lucia had ever been. In 87, who's the champion? I was just entering college, 11, 12 years old. Don't you know, the new champion they land? That song came out. That was the reason that's Robbie and them. And when that song came out, we won OECS volleyball, basketball, tennis, netball, everything on a regional level. We won in terms of the Windward Islands and OECS. And it was a great time to just see victory, 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 and what that did for us. And at the time I was doing Looshans and I was doing staff party and stuff, there's times when you feel persecuted. And I kept saying to myself, but at the end of the day, I'm proud of St. Lucia. I'm not making fun or doing these things because I give up on St. Lucia or I'm trying to denigrate the country. I'm doing it because I think it's funny, but also let's answer the questions. Let's answer the questions. Right now, if I ask the average, you could ask even your callers, your listeners, your viewers, right? Because there's still the debate over the two Peters. Because the average St. Lucian believes the two Peters are in Soufrière, right? Now, when you tell them that one of them is in industry Choiseul, right? They just go along with it. But do people necessarily know that? Do the national consciousness, do we know these things, right? So, ancillary, the only community named after a fish. Why did they name Miku Miku? Fellas tell me, because look licks,
Miku.
Miku, yeah, things like that, right? Those kinds of things, and you see, we take it for granted. And you talk about educated people. One time I was trying to make the point of how many hours in a day, because I wanted to talk about Moshi Day, Marsha Day, Babono Day, because they would normally have 3 days and call it a day, right? Where you have your little block codes and stuff. So I say, Mon Report Day, Marsha Day, all that. So I'm trying to get to the part where I'm asking the question, how many days in a day, how many hours in a day, how many hours in Laclery Day, right? And I can't get past the how many hours in a day. So I go to a school and the lady's dropping off her daughter. The lady's well dressed, looking like she's a clerk in an accounting firm or something like that. The lady breaks down crying. She's dropped off her daughter. I couldn't put that on the air. The lady broke down because she didn't know how many hours in a day. Wow. I went over to Gablewoods. It was Julian's then. It's now Massey.
Yeah.
And I went and asked that question of a supervisor in the back room. Stop ticking. How many hours in the day? 12. He told me. And I went around asking that question. And I was so freaked out at how many people in St. Lucia didn't know how many hours in a day. Going to taxi drivers and asking them, what is glass made from? And taxi drivers, bus drivers, they don't know. They're sitting, driving every day, but it never occurred to them. And then you realize that it's a cultural thing that we all, and like I said, the term pluralistic ignorance. Up to this day, I mean, I know the story of William Peter, but I don't know what William Peter looks like. Those kinds of things. I only found out in the last 5 years, thanks to Sir Calix George Sr., that my grandfather ran one of St. Lucia's first homeless shelters and soup kitchens at the bottom of Rock Hall. My
Wow.
Calix George Sr. written a book about it, Pappy Clark. Michael Chasney told me once when I worked with him briefly that his mother was going to give him and his brother up for adoption. And my great-grandfather, Pappy Clark, had Clark's drugstore and took the $10, which was the total take for the day in terms of the till, and gave it to her. And she started a bakery. And that is how she put her children through school. He told me that he and his brother never went to the same party together, because one would have to stand up and throw the other's shoes out of the window, right? And that he had so many patches on his uniform because he had to wear his uniform for a decade, right?
Wow.
And he said that they called him patches at school because he couldn't afford a uniform. Now, when you know these things and you realize, it makes you, to me, maybe I'm just different, but I think I'm in the majority. It doesn't make you ashamed. It makes you more proud. It makes you feel the texture to St. Lucia, and it makes you feel a level of comfort that, as bad as we are, we're pretty damn great. We accomplished some stuff. We've done some stuff, some great stuff. When you pass by the Walcott house, can you imagine that man sitting in that little window there and having the imagination to project a whole... We could have, what's the name of this thing? Warthogs, oh God, what's the name of the Harry Potter? We could have had, by now, a whole movie franchise off of Walcott's books. The imagery of egrets and all of these things. But you know what the problem is? In St. Lucia, we don't want to discuss it. We just stay in our corners and we just go along to get along. So you will get in your vehicle tomorrow and you will go on the highway and you will see 2 different spellings for a certain part of St. Lucia. Like, for example, we have measurements in miles, we have vehicles with kilometers, those kinds of things. And we just go about our business. And a lot of times it's when the children come and ask you questions. And, you're like, okay, well, the truth is, I don't know how to explain why such and such is so and so. There we go.
Wow. Definitely. Even on our vehicle inspections, they just put odometer. So you now have to specify whether it's kilometers or miles. Like, wow.
But look at that. They said that the 3D number plates, right, are not legal, right? But I find the 3D number plates easier to read than some of the stylized plates that you can buy that just have a name, Johnny, or whatever.
Inclusive.
But yeah, so I don't know, like I said, there's so many.
But I think they repeal that.
But why peel it to then repeal it, if you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So many of the things that we are doing in St. Lucia, let me tell you something. You go into government, and it happened to me. There is a celery green, right? Faded green color that is the color for most official folders and whatever. When you ask them, why is government stationery, why does it always have like predominantly that faded green? People tell you, that's how I met it.
That's how I see it.
That's how I came to it. So nobody questions anything. And people look at you as some sort of iconoclast if you do question stuff. But isn't it natural to just question? There was an elephant in St. Lucia at one time. When? Why? What's the deal? What's the story behind there? And until we put these things in place, national history, the patois in the schools and all of these things, until all of these things come, and we still, to me, Julian Alfred and others are helping, Boo Hinkson, Luther Francois, Teddyson John and others are helping, but we still have an identity problem. And if you don't have an identity, you cannot move forward because you don't know what and who you're moving forward. You don't know, like for me, I don't apologize for Isalop. I don't see it as a curse. I understand the history of it. I don't see it as a problem. When I was in Form 1, shit was a curse. My French teacher was teaching about, she said a French word, shit, right? And she said, no, not shit. And she said, no, right? Shit was a curse. By the time I reached Form 5, shit wasn't a curse anymore.
Wow. Contemporary changes.
Yeah. And we talk about culture, but we never talk about fluid culture. So the truth is, 100 years from now, the emblematic symbol of the COVID mask is a cultural phenomenon. Us with our heads bent down with our cell phones will be a cultural symbol of our time. Just like in the 70s, it was bell bottoms and afros and stuff like that. Or in the 80s, it was neon sneakers and spray paint and and Michael Jackson and Prince and all the rest of that. So all of these things tie together, but we need to come to a point of absolute identity. I heard the stories of Denry's segment and how it was first called Quigley. And there was one time he wanted to call it Lushan something. I've forgotten the name. And I was like, no, we're not
Lushan Kuduro.
Yeah, Lushan Kuduro. But who out of us knew Kuduro? I still don't know what Kuduro is, but I know what solo is. But why are we apologizing for all of these things, solo and stuff like that? For me, I could tell you, I grew up with Halloween being promoted, Fright Night, Jason, Freddy Krueger. I loved watching the evolution through a brilliant thing that people like Boots and Fish did to engineer Journée Creole. Journée Creole is the best holiday in St. Lucia because it is the one holiday, the one festival that we have that actually, if you want to call it poor or lower class or whatever, are the ones who have the authenticity. You're not looking for Nike ties in Madras. You're not looking for Christian Dior. You're not looking for Calvin Klein. You're looking for the authentic thing that the person made. Some lady in the middle of Miku or Denry is more respected for doing her stew pork than any sous chef in any hotel anywhere on the island. Those kinds of things, right? The interaction. It doesn't have to have merchandising like toys coming from the States or England or Japan or any of these things. And all it was is to get people to spend time together. Now, if you tell me if I believe, I will always be against Journée Creole being in urban settings. I don't like it in Castries. I don't want it in Vieux-Fort Town. I don't want it in Soufrière Town. I want it in places where you see bush. I want it in places that are remote. I want it in parts of Oleon. I want it in parts of Babono, Kabish, all these places. That's me.
So what do you think about, for example, remote places in urban districts? So like, let's say, Deramo in Moshi, Foaso in Babono, these places.
That works for me as long as it's remote enough. So if you tell me you're going to go and you're going Mont Blanc in Labrie and you say you're having there, or you're having Jetwin, or you're having Zeno, I get it. As long as your traffic management, like for example, I hope Junequel will reach a place like the Wen playing field in Monrepo, right? But now I see that there's a provision for like a ring road. Once you have the traffic management, because the truth is, St. Lucians don't know St. Lucia. When I was in college, we were the ones that started, well, not me, but the people and started making fun. Guys, what happened to you from Buto, man? You from Buto? I said, you ever go Buto? You see how beautiful that place is? Not just regular beautiful, like movie, like you have to stop it. And when you drive through Buto, you can actually see Amazona versicolor in a mango tree right by the road. Wow. There's a chattel house. The first little wooden house that's there is over 100 years old. Do you know that when Josephine came to St. Lucia at one point, she actually stayed in Soufrière? But I bet you didn't know that Josephine is also disputably, because Martinique claims that Josephine is supposed to be from Pebouche Babono.
Yes, I was checking out documentary.
Right? Do you know that there are trails from Babono where the soldiers went from Babono all the way to the Mon?
From Babono to the Mon?
Yeah, to the Fort Charlotte, which is South Louis. Right? These are things I didn't know. For example, the people on the council were telling me how Babono got its name, Abaglo. I didn't know that.
I thought Babono was just the land of many waters.
Bro, here's the point. I can't tell you that even what was told to me was perfectly right, because we need to establish these things once and for all. Right? There are a lot of things that we need. I just saw this clip making the rounds about Chichibui.
Yes.
And, but I'm trying to think to myself, who would have heard in a submarine to hear when the torpedo was being shot underwater to hear right?
The full show people.
You see? Yeah. Now, is it full show? Is it for show? I still don't know. I still up to now. So for me, I personally was very happy doing Looshans, and if I could have found a way to make it make money, real money. The one thing that I'm trying to do, but I mean, I'm not aging well, and the guys have moved on. Some live in Canada, some live in the States, some living by Amas, getting rum tonight as we speak, right? But in doing it, the one thing I wanted to do was to do a movie. And I know the plot of the movie. I know how I have the skits written down, everything. But it's to get to the point where you mobilize people. And if you're going to do that, you need money.
You need money, yeah.
Yep.
Wow. Because I'm looking at Looshans in its entirety, its legacy, and like I said, guys like Daniel make a big social media following with a mic, a camera, spell cat, and then somebody will say CAG. They do that, they get a massive following, and right now with Facebook, your following turns into income.
If I had the clips, I think I have not more than, if I have 13%, just over 10% of everything, it's a lot. And the problem is, when I was trying to get and rescue whatever I could, the person who was helping me was Libo. Now, Libo passed in 2016, and we were only about 3 months into trying to clean up and dig out and everything. So even in terms of that threw off everything. I put a lot of what I had into the Looshans Christmas special, and even then I still have a couple of things more, but the problem is, and I'm telling you, it's so painful to look at what you have, knowing all that is not there, and you say, shit, that clip was so much funnier, that clip was so much better, you don't have it.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, and the worst part is the outtakes. If you think the show was crazy, the outtakes were ridiculous. I once took a guy who was sleeping under a house, some cots, next to cots on Rose Hill, right? I took that guy and we had him, and all he had to say was, now coming to you via satellite. And we were playing that we were having a talk show, and he had to say that. 4 hours plus trying to get him to say that one line. And I was determined that I was not going to give up until we got him to say that one line. And for 4 hours plus, everybody sat there. We sat there. And you know the worst part? We did the show, we did everything, and we tried to get him to say that. We pretended the camera was on, the camera was off. We did all different types of things. You know, we never got him to say it.
Never.
Never. But you know what? The next day he said it.
Wow.
The next day he said, but he just couldn't say now coming to us via satellite, right? So many things. I mean, in terms of when there was still more homophobia and stuff like that, I must give credit to people like Shomak in terms of his bravery to sort of get people to become more of a tolerant society and so on.
Yeah.
And we interviewed these guys, and we had some guys with us, and we were trying to find out, boy, if you ever ask the question, so Hedata, who else you know that's on a side, you know? Who else is, you know, with y'all?
On the DL.
Yeah, boy. When you see them fellas start to tell you, and you're like, after a while, you actually don't want to know.
Yeah.
And then one fella's there, capture, guys, I know that man. I know that one. I know that one. The fella said, and I'm not talking about Shomak, I'm talking about because we interviewed, we had McDoom, we had a number of them, right? When that fella came, the fella said, guys, you troubling the man, but your father and I, boy.
Yeah.
You know, those kinds of things. So the outtakes were amazing. It was a ridiculous ride. It was crazy. And the thing about it was, I keep saying, and people can get upset with me, St. Lucians cannot act as a people. What we do things for amusement. So if I have to hide behind a wall and I'm spying, in a movie, you'll see Denzel Washington behind it, and it's like that. But in St. Lucia, this is what we do. Right? We dramatize, but we don't act per se. So what I did was, over time, I got people who were the characters. So I wasn't trying to get guys to fake like they were drinking alcohol. I got, you can debate functional, alcoholics.
Yeah.
Right? And they did it. And I happened to be working at distillers at the time.
Okay.
But there was never, ever an apple juice for Scotch. There was never Ribena for Campari. Nothing.
Just
And straight. And those guys, let me tell you something. If these guys could have drank the literal bottle itself, they would have done it. And it was amazing. But let's face it, do we have a problem with alcoholism in this country? Right? All of the people that are fighting down marijuana, right? And I've never smoked weed in my life. I think I've ingested it once, but I've never smoked it, right? But the point is that think about where we might have been if we had legalized marijuana as opposed to. And then you go back to, for example, the Rastafarian colony on Mount Jimmy.
Yes.
You know, those kinds of things. I would love it if, as a tourism initiative, I don't care which government, somebody said for heritage tourism, why don't we rebuild that colony? Why don't we give the Rastafarian associations and all of them, however many acres of land, let them implement their curriculum. And just like you have the Amish in the United States and other places, let the people have their place to. Tourists can go up there, they pay, they stay, they live their life, they this, that, and the other, they farm. No, not farm, they garden. No big difference between farming and gardening.
Gardening,
right?
okay.
Because farming, we depleting the soil, but gardening, we are working together with the soil. A lot of people don't realize we need to take a lot of the banana peels and the onion peel and these things and actually throw it on
Like
to
a
compost, that
compost.
kind of a thing. Those kinds of things. But all of these things still come from an identity crisis. We still apologizing for things. You know, when I hear people talk about that person black or this, that, and the other, when I was growing up, I was fighting, I was staying in the sun extra long to get as dark as I could. That was what I was trying to go for. And then you had other people tell you couldn't work in the bank unless you were fair skinned and all these kind.
The stereotype still existed back then. I thought that was a modern, contemporary issue, I should say.
Those actually, a lot of these issues still exist now. They still exist now. The inferiority complexes and all of these things that come from not having that
Right.
and that sense of identity.
Yeah,
And
right
that-
now they use that term easy on the eye, you know.
Well, the one thing I can tell you, I don't know, because Dave Chappelle is one of the greats, and Dave Chappelle, to my mind, no longer even is able to do comedy. What I think Dave Chappelle does, I think Dave Chappelle just tells you what he thinks and tells you what's in his mind, because political correctness has gotten to the point where there's no room to maneuver. And I understand, when I was young, I was homophobic. And I get the part about being more sensitive. There are things that I look at that I did with Looshans that I would not do now because they were appropriate then, but they're not necessarily appropriate now.
No.
I got a lot of licks for Batman and Robin, right? I got a lot of licks for it, and people thought I was promoting gay, and this. But then I also found that there were a lot of people in the gay community that were trying to be on the show because they too thought that that was what I was doing. And the truth was, I had no agenda like that. My agenda was simply to do something funny, find anything that could be funny, knowing the rudiments of humor. As a matter of fact, somebody who helped me out tremendously is like an older brother, father figure. A lot of these guys, Colin Hunt, Bernard Allingaford, who even sponsored the show heavily, Tony Rohiman and so on. But Dennis Morissette, Junior Morissette, he has sanitary upkeeps. When I did my first episode and I played it, the pilot, he was the one that told me he couldn't laugh at the first joke or hear the second joke because the first joke people were laughing. So I had to learn to space my jokes out to the point where we literally, Junior, myself, others, we used to sit down and say, okay, do we expect a laugh here? That's 10 seconds, 15 seconds. And we used to edit so that people had time to laugh. Because there's different types of laughs. St. Lucia has a unique laugh where people actually finish laughing and they go, woo!
Yeah.
We do that. What is that? We don't know. Is it fake? Is it real? Because some people can fake it and it really sounds real. But the point is, even the science behind those things. When are you putting slapstick comedy? When are you going to get hit and knocked down? And when are you going to have something where somebody curses? And the other things, like, for example, we were the ones that, this thing about giving you a receipt, KFC used to take your receipt. And we used to say, you take in my receipt, but I pay for something, but you take in my receipt.
Yeah.
So we did one skit on that. We did it at the back of St. Mary's College, and they changed the procedure. Now what they do, they tear the receipt and they put it in your bag. So when you see some of the changes that you can help affect, some of the things. But for me, the one place that I think we failed was politics, because, like I said, the public got the message, but the electorate on both sides, on all sides, they didn't get the message. Up to this day, I don't think the message is received.
Yeah, that too is a very important thing, because you speak heavily to elucidation and the need for more or less like social empowerment, because as much as I see Looshans was, I would say, 80% comedy, the balance of it was a lot of social empowerment, through the music that you did, like for example, that song Mali Way, and you were like, if you see your brother, give him a helping hand, basically talking to the large base of the average person in Lucian. This is what they have to go through. How do you think what do you think is the impact? And also, I don't want you to just speak to the impact, but also your journey musically, because you would have been doing Lucians post your school. Yeah. And then you also jumped into the calypso / soca.
The funny thing is, whenever somebody tells me about Malawi, I always remember the line that I had about, "And all George get from the Libyans."
Yeah.
And I met George Odlum in town, and he was sitting he was driving. It was a white sidekick, I think, at the time. Yes, it was a sidekick. But he said, "You see, I haven't gotten anything from the Libyans." Huh? And I was happy, that he took it in stride, that type of a thing. But again, music was on a dare. My first song was actually about Rick Wayne. It was called Straight Up.
Straight Up.
Yeah, Straight Up was the first song. I recorded it in Rob Zy Taylor's bathtub. Wow. No. Rob Zy Taylor was the second one. I recorded on a guy's bed singing up into his ceiling in Mornier, and Andre Paul played it. And then I went, and that's how I got my first job, which was great thanks to Mr. Going up at HTS. And I went on Straight Up twice. And because at the time I wasn't working, I was offered a job as a radio presenter. Now, if you DJ and you play music and stuff like that, you're in music and you hear it. And for me, I was hearing the structures. I've written about 60 plus songs. I've given songs to many different artists and stuff. Some of them have used them, others haven't been used, even in the political thing. I'm staying with labor, all these things, writing country and western and all these things,
I
right?
would never know that. I thought I was like a
I'm with labor from neighbor to neighbor. That was Invader.
Yeah.
They say John's lost his memory, those kinds of things. And for Looshans writing songs, I did the Maliway song and the Looshans Road March anthem. Everywhere them people pass, they only beating their ass. Still banned, eh? Still banned.
Still banned.
Still banned.
That's what 2003.
Yeah, and up to last year, somebody just played on radio. Said, oh, sorry, we can't play that. But they can play how much Drake and all them fellas cursing left, right. But that's okay. That's okay. St. Lucia again. We let our children watch Avengers with cursing in it, but we let them watch it. We let them pass on the highway, endless people quarreling and cursing on the bus. Right? But at the end of the day, we have that sort of hypocritical thing. Let me tell you how how weird St. Lucia is. You want an idiosyncrasy. We go to jazz. You and I go into jazz. The first time we meet, oh God, yeah, my G, what is it?
Yes, sir.
The second time we pass, yeah, man. The third time we pass, yeah. By the fourth time, we just have to agree to ignore each other and we just walking by and we buying our drink.
Yeah.
That's us. These things, you might think that they are things everybody does, but they aren't necessarily things everybody does. Musically, it was just another way to message. It was just another thing to do. And my thing was, Pele told me something because I did presentation for Pele and for Invader. And Invader won with Playing a Mass, and Pele won presentation for Pusher in the House. And Pele, and we even spoke to a judge later on, years later, and she told us, one of the things I told Pele was, everybody has to pretend that they don't see the wheelchair. Don't make people pretend they don't see the wheelchair. Use the wheelchair to your advantage. And we won by having the guy who, the judge, the Speaker of the House was trying to sexually assault, pull him onto the chair. And you know that literally they said that the points that Pele got changed because of that, right?
Wow.
Just a little attention to detail, but it's called breaking the fourth wall, where, the thing that people have to kind of make like they don't see, make it part of the whole thing. Now, for me, Pele told me something that always stuck with me, and he was right by his bed in his house, in his chair, and he said, all creatives, particularly musicians, you get ideas at 4 o'clock in the morning. Do not go back to sleep. Write it down. From the time Pele told me that, I write it down. I get up in the middle of the night. Up to 2 days ago, I have a song idea, and I record it on my phone, or I type it or whatever, right? Because it's not so much what you want to create, it's what allows itself to be created through you. And I'm not trying to be spiritual, but a sculpture, when you see somebody come out with like the Martin Luther King sculpture, that person could have had pictures of Martin Luther King every which way he wanted, but to take that chisel and to keep going at and taking out, right? When you have a lyric in your mind, like there's a song that I'm working on there right now, and I was waiting by the airport to pick up somebody, and I was 20 minutes early, so I had an idea for a song. So I just wrote the song. I wrote the verse and the chorus, and I'm going to put out the song. So the point is, if you have the ideas, do justice to them as best you can within reason. So for me, I would have ideas for songs. Maliway was an idea. My friend Bert's novel died. I had that song, We Can't Live So. It was to commemorate him and talking about violence on the whole. I had songs that were just about gimmicks. I had songs like Kill It. The simple point of Kill It, which I'm surprised is still alive today. Right? Ironic that a song says Kill It and it still hasn't died. But the funny thing about the song was, it was the answer to a question at the time, what is the most well-known song in St. Lucia besides the national anthem? And at that time, it was Radio St. Lucia's theme for the death announcements. So all it was, and that was never on a tape or a record, it was on an 8-track, and they recorded it and it ended up on a digital system. So I got that, and the whole song was based on that gimmick There were those who said controversial at the time. The song is disrespectful. The song has no lyrical foreplay. People, I remember Rick Wayne and Andre Paul saying how disappointed they were because the song was so crass. This, that, and the other. But it wasn't made for them. And when I got out on the road, there you go. So the thing about it is, you're not gonna have successes. You're gonna have failures. You're gonna have successes. But it's more about just respecting what the ideas that come, right? So my thing is, if you have an idea, the worst thing you can do is not to pursue it to some level, because these things haunt you. I literally go to sleep, and there are times when I wake up because I was like, shit, I knew I had to do this, I didn't do that, this and the other. When it comes to any idea that comes, I try to pursue it, and if I don't think I can pursue it, believe me, I will try to find somebody and at least suggest it to them, which is a bit stupid. People like, why you come in and tell me that? But I still give my ideas. And to be honest with you, when I look back at some of the ideas that I will not get credit for, when people say, Gasa, you're not going to get this. Michael Chasney saw me cutting the bush with a cutlass by my home at 12 years old, because I just wanted to get across the road to go and take bus. I didn't want to walk the long way. I was lazy. I go and play tennis and basketball and football, but I didn't want to go. He met me cutting the bush. He told me, brother, what would you put here? I told him, but hair has no shopping as any other. You can call Michael Chasney now. We're not on the same political sides.
Yeah.
But Michael Chasney's memory is spot on right now. And he can tell you, Gable Woods, right? Gable Woods, literally, to the point where he still told me he should have. And when you hear somebody that's as successful as him tell you, he should have taken my idea to put the cinema where is M&C drugstore right now.
Yeah.
And when he put the cinema up north, and then he saw Caribbean cinemas, when he met me decades later, he told me, you were right, brother. I should have put the cinema there at the time. And these little ideas that you'll have, and then you see how they take off. These are the good things that you want. So for example, now, and I'll tie it back, when you come back to things like Damn Proud Lushan, I just love the fact that it is something people will not remember me. They'll remember the guy what's his name singing it now, right? I don't care.
And also, I think there's one by DYP.
Yeah, but to be honest with you, I don't care in the sense that at the end of the day, there's a tapestry that is St. Lucia. It's like a quilt, and everybody puts their piece into it, a mosaic, and you're just happy that you did. For example, when people say Looshans, right? Just knowing that Ziggy James and I were up Beau Séjour, where we had a little studio that we had to wait for when the fellas were not grinding metal for Radiator and Hose Works. And I was in two minds. There was two ways. We were either going to call the show the Papi Show, because I knew Papi Show was something that was regional as a term, and I could use Trinidad, Barbados, Jamaica, or Looshans. And it's just like Looshans. And now, whenever I hear people say Looshans, I mean, could you ask for a better sobriquet or nickname that I'm walking in the middle of New York and I'm actually in a terminal in Dubai and somebody just said Looshans, and that's me.
Nice.
You know, and I don't like when people give themselves nicknames. You know, like what's his name? Lochter. Irvin Ace Lochter. Yes. You know? I mean, I understand that you branding and everything, right? But I like nicknames, like I said, they call out dog balls, you know? And that one's Latet, you know? They just give you a name, you know?
Yeah.
Right? They give you your name, fine. But I mean, I've been called Looshans, jackass, asshole, basketball, cat eye. I've been called all those things. But to know that if I were to die today, that I could literally just put Looshans on my epitaph, as my epitaph, and I'm good. One word. It's just like when you have Ali has his grave and he just has Ali. You don't need to say anymore. Yeah. Yeah, that's that for me. That's legacy enough for me.
Nice. Yeah, well, you definitely celebrated. If we look in the comments, a lot of love coming. You know, people are happy to see you, and there are lots of comments.
Well, that's good to know.
Yeah, your impersonation of Rick Wayne was spot on.
But actually, Rick Wayne, and I used to have to get coaching. Rick Wayne, like for example, you see how I'm sitting right now?
Yeah.
Rick Wayne always sits. Perfect posture. Rick Wayne, when he's 88, sit at the edge of the chair. Rick Wayne back never touch a seat. Right? When his back was on the seat later on in life, it's only because of back pain. perfect posture, right? And then you have to get the people's catchphrases. For example, the Prime Minister always, people say he stutters, and he will even say stutters, stammers. He doesn't. What it is he's in constant parenthesis. He starts making a point, and he'll tell you,
I'll tell you something.
exactly. You know you are going on, I'll tell you something. Right? Do you know, and he doesn't know this, neither does Kenny Anthony. Anytime he puts his hand in his pocket and you give him a mic, he speaks completely fluidly, just like Kenny Anthony. Once Kenny Anthony's hands go like that, right? For example, I know when Shasney is going to fake a cry, because anytime he's going to fake a cry, he hits his left hand onto wherever he's talking. No. Things, for example, the blinking. I'm making up something. I'm making up. Those kinds of things. Idiosyncratic routines you pick up in terms of people, you know. My father had a pet phrase, as far as I'm concerned. From the time I'm 5 years old, I'm always looking at that phrasing as far as I'm concerned. But Rick is, and funny, eh? I don't think I've ever said this. Rick Wayne, first person I've ever seen in terms of dieting, huh? Right? I mean, talking the days of Schwarzenegger and all these people. Come to my parents' home, the man eating a whole plate of salad. Everybody, macaroni, peas, plantain, rice, everything. Talk for half an hour, eat a whole plate, 3 barbecue chicken legs, whole legs. Man ate no pasta, no rice, nothing. And he gone. And you're like, what? And now, generations later, you know, like how the Rastafarians, people used to make fun of Rasta. Y'all only talking about agriculture. Now you're hearing emerging themes like donut economics, sustainable economics, eat what you grow. If we were listening to the Rastafarian community all those decades ago, how much further and healthier we would have been?
Yeah.
Do you know that the OKEU hospital, largest grant aid ever given from the EU to the Caribbean, from Kenny Anthony's administration, they got that. You know how we got that?
How?
We didn't get it because then people were altruistic towards us. It's because of the amount of cancer that we had in farmers for using all those chemicals. You may not know it. When I was a boy, up to 15, 16, you playing sports and you just seen a plane passing, spray plane.
Yeah.
All of these things. I want you to look at things. When you look on the west coast, you're going down south. Ancillary canneries, lush vegetation, soufre, everything.
Green.
Look at how we overfarmed Dennery, how we overfarmed Miku, killed a lot of the rivers and so on, right? And because overfarming poisoned our people. And in many ways, we didn't know better. But the point is, these people will give you a 50 million euro hospital, because if you actually went to court, it might take you 3 decades kind of a thing, 30 years. But the point is still the same, that, you know, we are people that keep disenfranchising ourselves because we don't know. Because something my father said to my cousin and myself, Sean Compton, one of St. Lucia's premier architects. I mean, at Christmas, and he said, and I'm challenging you right now, name one thing all St. Lucians agree on. I challenge anybody online. I challenge anybody. You see, Americans, they disagree on all kinds of things. Germans, French, Guyanese, they disagree. Trinidadians, there's certain things that they agree on. St. Lucians, we cannot even agree to the name.
Name of St. Lucia?
Saint, S-A-I-N-T-S-T.
S-T.
Why are we still okay, Helen of the West Indies. I was always confused. Helen, to the point where Helen was more prominent than St. Lucia. Right? Those kinds of things. Are we 238 square miles? Are we 240?
40.
Do we even think to ourselves that Babono is not a district? Babono is part of Castries.
What happened to Dauphin?
But at a point, is it Dauphin not a district because it doesn't have enough population? What is the deal? Right? All of these things we need to determine once and for all. You know, put a coat of arms, it have a touch in it because Compton. I listened to an interview on RCI. Sherry-Ann Gillard was thinking, a great one. Boy, there's a man, Dunstan St. Omer. Knowing him personally is 10,000 times more impressive than anything you'll see on TV. Mate, if you want to talk about somebody that's naturally funny and brilliant satirically, everything, boy, mates like John Wayne, Ronald Reagan, anybody with that kind of. And mate said on an interview that he had another flag.
He had another
He had
flag.
another flag. It had green in it, right? A little bit of red, and it was totally different. And he said when the people rejected it, or he said he wasn't formally rejected. When he felt rejected, he stayed outside, and he and Roddy Walcott and the Arts Guild people, whatever, they were into pyramidism at the time, and that's where he came with the flag, right? And he had to go through a process. It wasn't just something, because your generation believes, sadly, that St. Lucia started in 1979. And even the way that we recall history, how do we recall our history? Associated statehood, crown colony,
And independence.
independence. But when I hear about Gale, Floor, Guyard, and all these things, I only hear about that now. The monument in the Suffrage Square was supposed to go down Vieux Fort. And then,
The freedom thing.
yeah, and then they just put it up when one government changed hands, and then they take it and they put it in the square. And does that freedom monument represent Gale, Floor, Guyard? No, it was for Vieux Fort, right? All those things. When people like, why is Vieux Fort named Vieux Fort?
I just know the meaning of Vieux Fort. Wasn't that the former capital?
No,
that's where the-
Soufrière was a former capital.
Okay.
Although wherever the mayor lived was a capital, so it might have been at some point, right? I thought growing up Vieux Fort, right, was Strong View. That's how growing up. Then again, I also, because I thought you wouldn't know him, Tyrone Maynard, Seaman Waterfront Workers. I thought he was the lead singer for Kassav. Whip. When I was growing up, I just told what's my name, the lawyer, Mr. McNamara, the lawyer. I just told him when I was a little boy, I thought he was the lead singer for Air Supply. You know what? Because he came to a children's party where I was at, and he came in a blue Camaro. And I only ever saw Camaro, that was before Knight Rider, on TV. When the man came out with a bomber jacket. You know, St. Lucians, I'm happy it's died down now. When I went on Sunday, I didn't see it. You know, St. Lucians, at the time of hip-hop and Biggie Smalls and others, St. Lucians used to be going to the ramp on Pigeon Island with winter jackets. Yeah, fellas come in winter jacket, they fully decked. Yeah, fellas come in bubble jacket, vest, everything, because the fashion was more important than whether you were cool. So you needed to be cool on the beach rather than be cool on the beach. But all of these little things that we
Kind of just adopted from here and there.
but even things that we created. A friend who we're not friends anymore, but he just came and he just said, guys, let's just try and popularize. Instead of calling girls Jamet and thing, let's just call a girl a po. And there was, a po. And there was a time when that was, everybody just used that. For example, the elite class of St. Lucia. I had a friend, he's a lawyer now, so I wouldn't mention his name. He said, he started to say, I watch what I'm going to do. He said, instead of saying gasser, he would just say gara, right? And he would start to popularize that with what we then call the yachties because of the yacht club, right? And the yachties. And now you hear these first, and they all seem to talk with the same accent, the elite, or if you want to call it white St. Lucian accent. Hey man, where you going over there, man? You know, man, hey, gara, yo, gara, what happened to you, gara? Oh, gara, what's going on, man? What up? You know? And you're like, wow, all of these little things. Even, for example, how we have masked racism now, right? The elite class in other countries is not predominantly Anglo-European, but in St. Lucia it is. You'll see some of them talking and they'll say, man, these fucking urchins. And you'll be like,
Urchin?
yeah, fly over your head.
Yeah.
Fly over your head, right? But they believe that no black person in St. Lucia will go to the bottom of the ocean to see that urchins are black. So it's a smart way of saying nigger without saying nigger, right?
Wow.
You see, these little things, little things that we have that are going for us, you know, and then it reaches into politics and you hear about, you need to be able to negotiate with all different people, you know, and that's the little dog whistle to tell you that, you know, this person is too dark or this person is too this or this person is too that. All of these things. But all of these things come back each time over and over to identity. And for me, I'm still defining myself. I hope I'm a hopeful work in progress because I haven't just made mistakes. I don't think as you get older you stop making mistakes. I think you just learn to live with the mistakes that you
That you
make.
made.
And you can do things knowing that they may not necessarily work, but you accept the consequences of it. For me, I would love to be doing Looshans. I would love to do I would love to, I mean, I still do music. I still try to do a song a year. I still have to learn to play the keyboard properly, just as a promise to Libo. Um, but for me now, the only way that I think I can make sure everything works, which is why I formed a company, Films and Lucia, is to do the actual film. So right now, I'm doing it's a real undertaking. It's taken me years, and I'm still not anywhere near where I need to be to do a documentary on Libo. And after that, I am going to try to do a Lucian's movie.
Yeah.
But I, and the plot, all I will tell you all is the plot is based on something that really happened. That's all I'll tell you.
All right. Well, let me try and put the number on the screen. Hopefully, we can get persons to call in and ask questions. One of the things I want to lament is actually, well, not lament, but I want to pick your brain. I've been following your commentary, and I think some years ago you were commenting about Tempest, and I think you said one of the drawbacks was that, with modern day events, there's always the need to have a foreign artist pool in those numbers and then supplement it with local talent. But the difference with Tempest, it was strictly local talent. What do you say to endeavoring a Tempest, let's say now, when you have events like Home, where you have, let's say, an Alpha Alley headlining and stuff?
It's not a St. Lucian thing alone. I mean, if you live in Brazil and Drake comes down to do a concert in Brazil, or Chris Brown, he'd probably sell out. Just like if Beyonce came to play at Pigeon Island, sell out, that type of a thing. So if it's something that's exclusive or something that you're not going to get to see, like right now, I think, was it We Are Gyra, You Are in a Magic City.
Yeah.
They come in.
Maverick.
City, sorry.
Yeah.
For me, I want to go to Freedom Night personally, but I'd go for that. So I get the draw part of it. But there's something a neighbor told me. She said to me, I will not leave my home for patriotism. And I was selling Tempest on patriotism. And somebody else said, why would I pay $20 to see Daman, and Daman living 2 houses down from me in Miku, and go up and see Daman this and the other? But these things have to evolve. Now there's a saying, sometimes if you go too far ahead of your troops, all you get is shot in the ass. And when you go too far, think about it. If you're too far ahead, you will get shot by those behind you. So for me, I was trying to do things that the artist didn't understand. And generally, Boo Hinkson is one of those that helped a lot. He understood. Libo obviously understood. Libo put in his heart and soul. Libo was producing the tracks, doing the samples, doing the television production, doing the rehearsals, doing everything, a one-man show. All what AI does for people now, Libo was doing by himself, right? But the thing about it was, when you have these developmental ladder type things, I tried to bring it into independence because I got involved in the independence committee from 2013, 2014, thanks to Daryl Montreux. And we tried to come with the slam concert, solution artist marketing, and get people to do different genres. So it wasn't just always calypso and soca, but other things. And when we did that, the problem was, what happens next? When StarQuest was around and Emran Henry won, they brought him. They said, "Well, we're going to take you to 106 and Park." They took him. He sat down in the front, in the audience. He wasn't featured. When they came out with Tempo, that's where Tempest came from, right? I took Tempest and I filmed it, and then I went physically to to Broadway. I went into Times Square. I stuck CDs and DVDs of the show, and I paid a messenger, fat American guy or white guy, to go upstairs and just put it on the desks of the executives, right? And the first person to pick up anything was David Levy. And David Levy was huge because David Levy was Hot 97 in New York. And then I was like, boy, This is just like the movies, you know. So I brought all the music and everything. The man have me. He stay on radio 3 hours. I can't get to say a word. I'm just sitting there. Can't do nothing. So it's like you can see the promised land, but you can't touch it. Nothing. Hot 97, and I'm in the middle. Same thing like when you had that Brown Sugar with what's her name, Sahana Lathan and Ty Diggs and everything. I'm at Hot 97, and I'm right there, but I just can't cross that boundary. I go to the DJ and I said, "Here's my music." David come in the back. He say, "You trying to go behind my back?" And like, what are you talking about? I said, "I try and market myself." But you see, in those days, you hustle. People were looking at you like you're too aggressive. Now everybody is a hustler. So I tried, but the problem was the artists, all of them, sadly, and that's the problem with the creative sector. You get a bunch of hoteliers together, different products, they will lobby and they'll come together for 4 or 5 things. You get a bunch of farmers together, they'll do the same thing. When you get artists together, sadly, many artists are predicated on the individuality. Even within a band, they will not learn to play an instrument. Sometimes they just want to be the lead singer. Everybody wants to be the star. And everybody was fighting to get me to choose them and focus on them. And the whole point of it was, if I had the X-Men, because I was a fan of most of these artists anyway, if I have the X-Men and I am Xavier and I'm there, why choose between Cyclops and Wolverine when everybody working together?
You can just like right now you have the Avengers.
Yeah.
Everybody's
So
there.
I came to that. That was where that saying came to me that I learned. If you want the African proverb, if you want to go quickly, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And from there, I realized that I could not, with them, it's a matter of what you define as success. For some people, success is just to go and sing in a bar, karaoke. For others, it might be, one girl told me if she had to be the #1 artist in Canada or the number 100 artist in America, she'd rather be in America. Nobody know her compared to in Canada. And you can't falter, because even people like Celine Dion went and transitioned to go to be in places like the United States. You know, Canadian Sarah McLachlan and all these people. And then you look for what's the commonality. Canada is a colony too. That colonial mindset, that vestige where we still need external validation, that's what I love about Denry segment the most. I used to look at music and I used to say, is it the best singer? No. Is it the best performer? No. Is it the best looking? No. Is it the one with the best stage presence? No. Is it the one that does the best interviews? No. Is it the one that's the best dressed? No. It is the one that can project truth and conviction and confidence in their music. Denry's segment for me has nothing to do with the music. You know what it has to do with?
What?
It has to do with those guys not giving 2 shits about who liked them, who didn't like them, who want to critique them, who want to this, that, and the other. The guys were just doing, you know, sometimes you get in a studio, and that's why I always say the most important equipment in a studio is a couch, because you're just sitting on a couch and some fella sitting there and a vibe comes. And when you catch that lightning, you run with that. And those guys just did what they did. They didn't necessarily need to know what they were doing. They were just doing what they were doing. And here, there were people like me who was trying to do R&B, trying to do hip-hop. Boo Winston told me a story. He went once to a club with Common. He was recording.
Oh, okay.
And Common took him to a club. And Boo had to relearn to play after the beat. Right? When St. Looshans rap, we rap and we think it's just our accents. But the truth is, Americans rap, and if you're not a musician, you will not hear the difference. But when St. Lucians rap, they rap in timing. And in America, there's a lag. For example, let me give you an example. It is fabled of how reggae music started. That when Peter Tosh and Bob Marley and them, they had like one central place that they were playing. There was a speaker, and the speaker had a delay. And when the fellas were playing, they got frustrated, so they just went with it. So when they played waka, you would hear it go waka, 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 steer it up, right? And that's the
nice.
That's the serendipity of the process. But we were so busy apologizing for our patois and the genres of music that we have.
Yep.
Calypso didn't come from St. Lucia, right? Calypso is Trinidad. But do you know that Trinidad Calypso was engineered by the government in Trinidad?
By the government?
Yep. The government wanted to bring the 2 races together. So they took the influences, the musical influences of the Indians and the lyrics and so on of black Afro Trinidadians, right? Brought that together, right? And they invested in their culture, right? In Jamaica, once they saw what happened with Bob Marley, creative industries, ministries, and stuff like that, I helped to pioneer the creative industries because Libo and I were invited to St. Vincent after Pirates of the Caribbean. Met with Ralph Gonzalez, met with the people. They told us all what they did. You know, ministers with heels going on dinghies to pass walkie-talkies into caves, holding on to rope, all these kind of things. And then I came back here and I said, boy, I'm seeding both parties to have creative industries. They do the research, get it set up and everything. But the point is, people like Jamaica, the reason they're so far ahead of us, you know, people like Beres Hammond were winning singing competitions in school since he was at the age of 14.
Wow.
You see, there's method to it. But because creative industries is so amorphous and people who are doing like accountancy or, you know, they selling plywood and lumber and stuff like that, when they come to see creatives performing on a stage, they don't understand the science. I have one of St. Lucia, the only qualified event manager in St. Lucia, is not in St. Lucia anymore, Oak Trees Entertainment, Lindale James. The guy is doing things for NFL football players. He's doing music video, managing sets for ESPN photo shoots and for swimsuit editions and what Janelle Monáe music video, which was supposed to happen down here as well, right? And all of these things because of the science of it. The stage, the sound, the lights, everything, the science of it. And now that we have, for example, our calendar still follows Lent to a point. But once you reach jazz, carnival, Emancipation Day, Journée Creole and everything, there's a level of sophistication that's building and capacity. You know, people like Yogi may say, I don't even think we understand what Yogi
did with the Grammy win.
But the other thing too is go back and look at all of the things that he did with St. Lucian artists. And there is no, you know, 50 Cent had a saying, he was a 15-year overnight success. You know, it's like you see somebody like a guy that did Austin Powers, Mike Myers, and you say, boy, that man was just like, you know, he just came out of nowhere. The man was doing his comedy all the years before, people just didn't check him out. Somebody will see if I magically right now became somebody in mainstream America, whatever they'd say, and people would know me from here. But the truth is, all these people went through the steps. Just imagine, do you know the Song of Love? Boo Hinkson. If you were a song of love, I'd play you forever and ever and ever and
Sounds
ever.
familiar, yeah.
If you were a song of love, be a million seller. Boo Hinkson wrote that song when he was 19. Working in the Treasury. A song that has been covered by Lou Rawls.
Wow.
Right? Song that has been covered on international charts. But St. Lucians still, your generation and others don't even know.
They just think Boo. That's
Boo,
all.
you know why? You know why? Because Boo lives in St. Lucia, has chosen to live in St. Lucia. If you want to book Boo, you're not calling Boo, hey Boo, guys, you know, you have to call the states, you know, this booking agent, you know.
Wow.
Boo has performed at the White House for Barack Obama. Boo was brought up to the White House with, and he brought St. Lucians with him, like Ace Lockton and so on, right? Bringing these guys up there, giving other St. Lucians opportunities, right? Boo is noted as the head actor, top 5 guitarists in the world. B.B. King and all these people, Boo is in the top 5 guitarists in the world. But because he lives in St. Lucia and he'll go and play in a hotel, just take it for granted.
Wow.
You see how Martinique treats Luther Francois? As if it was, hey, just be working in a hotel. God, I want to play no saxophone. That's not your generation's fault. That's my generation and the generations before. I'm not saying that there aren't people who support and celebrate these people, but not to the level. And it's because we have, as a country, I'm happy that we seem to be getting out of it, an inferiority complex that came from colonialism. We still require external validation. We still require. So you mean to tell me Julian Alfred had to win a
Olympic medal.
Olympic medal? Now Cicero is a good place? or we needed to wait. Now we see a problem with Monkey Town.
Yeah.
Now we have a problem with Monkey Town. Why didn't we have a problem with Monkey Town before? Because we were making fun of other people that lived in Monkey Town, right? When you go down Denry, they have Zulu Town, right? Are we good? But then again, is Zulu an insult because the Zulus were proud warriors, right? So all of these things need to be resolved. And if we can resolve these things just little by little, just a culture of confronting the little things about us. You know, I mean, like I said, I grew up, I wasn't speaking patois, and they used to say Bazu D. Right? Just think about it. Bazu Cheeks D. In cartoons, Bazu D. Right?
I thought that was an actual word, you know.
That's my point. I could, and I'm telling you what I learned, but is what I learned, did I learn it correctly? Is it right? You know, so many questions. It becomes more and more fascinating the more you look at it. But at the end of the day, St. Lucia, we've crossed the Rubicon in the general sense, because we now reach a point now where people will say, like I was in India, I got gifted an opportunity to go to India. When the people ask me, you from I didn't understand half of what, but you know what? Darren, Sammy. So I said, people know me one time.
Wow.
Right, good. Now, there's another interesting experience. We trace everything to Afrocentricity. Until I went to India about 3 years ago, I did not realize so much of our architecture, even things like the CDC buildings, India
Inspired.
India inspired.
That's
right?
from the UK.
You see, we keep thinking of the African influence in St. Lucia, right? But we do not think, for example, we sing songs about Pum Pum. Pum Pum is Indian.
I thought that was Jamaican.
Punani is Indian.
Thought that was Jamaican.
Right? Punani comes from Trinidad, then Jamaica, but it actually comes from the Kama Sutra.
Ah.
Right? There you go. Now, isn't it good? Now, what we need to do is to have these things, but we're so busy apologizing for them, right? In Canada, you hear that saying, the real McCoy. McCoy was a black man. I learned this from a friend in Canada who's a black history buff, right? McCoy was a black Canadian guy who was a train engineer, and he built parts. And anytime anybody would try to copy the parts, they would fail. So eventually people only ordered the real McCoy parts. Now Canada knows that.
I thought that was Movado.
Right. Now, yeah, Canada knows that. So if Canada knows that about themselves, why don't we know the things about us that make us? I love the idea of being long dead and gone, and somebody looking like right now, I'm so proud to look at the social studies textbooks for primary schools, and you see Teddyson John in there.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, to know that Julian Alfred. And maybe one day somebody will say, boy, the first person to say, damn proud Looshans, I think was Christopher. That's good enough for me.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't happen, still, I don't really care. Because at the end of the day, do you need the pride of authorship, or do you just want to see your country prosper?
Yeah.
That's the main thing. So even when you talk about politics, I'm not so concerned with political parties. I would like us to at least consider different political systems. But the main thing is I'm more curious as to where we want to go. Where does St. Lucia see itself by the year 2050? Where do we want to position ourselves in the world, right? And the days of being a third world country, in the age of the internet, is intellectual properties. So we can have people, I mean, architects now. My cousin's an architect. He just said he wants to go and spend a year living in, is it Vietnam or Bangladesh or one of these places? And so it doesn't affect his work because his work is online.
Yeah.
Right? So we have to reimagine how we think about St. Lucia in many different ways. Even, for example, that's why I love community tourism, because, you know, everybody can have the pitos, you know?
Or the beaches.
Right. If you're in Castries Southeast, what is unique about Castries Southeast, right? That you can't find anywhere else in St. Lucia. And one person, the juice man, Ambrose Anatole, he said, you cannot get to any part of the north or south without going through Castries Southeast.
Mm.
You must go through. Now, is it worth making a poster about? I don't know. But the point is, it's good to start thinking about those things.
Yeah, heart of St. Lucia.
There's a place in Vieux Fort North, in Bellevue, where there's a lady who has a tree that grows red plums or something like that, and she makes like a mango chutney kind of a thing. Only there. There's a tree from the Trumasse family or whatever in Miku that is nowhere else in the world but in Trumasse.
Really?
We let Cabot come and do their shit, right? We had indigenous cactus that was found nowhere else in the world. All the time, they were in the 40s and 30s, they were paying people to kill snakes like fer-de-lance. Now people like Jimmy Fletcher point out to you that you have universities paying big money to get the venom of fer-de-lance because that helps with people who have heart attacks.
Oh, wow.
Right? So we talking about outer space and America and Canada and Europe and all these places, and we haven't discovered St. Lucia. So many St. Lucians know more of Flatbush. They know more of Toronto than they know about St. Lucia itself. How many people even turn off the road? I'm surprised at the amount of people who go down to Vieux Fort to the airport but have never been into Miku.
Like in the village?
Not even the village. Not even the village. So I'm so happy when I see Philadelphia Row and I see, like now, I'm happy. It's something Sir John wanted to do since 2007, to do a peace concert at Point Vierge. But how many people know Point Vierge is St. Lucia's largest peninsula? Or there's a plunge pool in the shape of St. Lucia. You know, those things. Discovery in terms of St. Lucia, and establish these things and market these things. I supposed to be seen on TikTok, a little 40, 45 second thing. Give you one. I only found out in the last 4 years that there were trams going up the mountain.
Oh, yes, the little pointy things. I think they're at the bottom.
When
at
you're
the
going
bottom.
up,
Yeah.
just as you pass, when you come up to Villa Apartments,
Yeah.
you will see the remnants of the trams. My uncle Roddy was the one that pointed out to me. I didn't know that.
Okay.
But that's great. So people came up by tram, you know. There's a friend of mine who's just come down from the States. His grandmother died. His grandmother lived in Ancillary. For 2 months, she walked from Ancillary to St. Mary's College because they didn't have common entrance until 1980, right? To get into school, to get her son into St. Mary's College. So imagine walking up from Ancillary every day and walking back. And could she have gone on horseback? No, because she couldn't afford a horse. So it was only a trail. But then again, I remember that hill Union there by Dame Paulette, going up to Degazo.
One separate hill.
Yeah, that hill. I drove up that hill with my father when it was stones, like it was you on Donkey Beach or one of these places, right? And I drove up that hill with my father going up in the constituency, and it was literally stones that were pelting out. But then again, you notice, I don't know if you know the amount of politicians that all had at one point Pajeros. Now it's called Pajero, right? You know who started that? My father, right? He got the second Pajero in St. Lucia, right? Because he had a twin cab, but he felt the ride was too rough in the Toyota Hilux. So he got a Pajero. And then all the politicians, Kenny Anthony, this one, that one, everybody. Now is Toyota Hilux, right? Or Nissan Frontier, right? All of these little things that come up. Just imagine I go now, when I live here, I live in Bonte, Kaimajé side. Every single lamppost that was put down in Kaimajé, my father paid with his own money.
Every lamppost in Kaimaji, that whole stretch of...
That's just the beginning of it.
Whoa.
That and that. I don't know, they may have been replaced over the years, but originally, right? The mothers and fathers halls. My father built 3 with his own money. In Moshi, all these places. Now you get a constituency office paid by the state as a member of parliament.
Yeah.
Right? My father paid for his own offices. My father had 4 constituency offices. Everybody now has 1. Right? My father had 4. 1 in Moshi, 1 in Grosley, 1 in Marisol, 1 in Grand Riviere. All of these things.
Wow.
You know? And even the way, like, you know, the town crier going and announce meetings. all these back roads. I couldn't understand how you could go from Babono to Ancillary and not go on the main road. I was only 12, but I'd be passing on the back road. Patie, Twal, Kajena, Guamitino, Swear, Vinisi Pote, Brother Julian Hunt. I used to do all of that stuff. And back then, those things were fun. But now, in an age of social media, we go further away from each other to connect. And I feel like we need more opportunities for social interaction. But we've invented, and we still have these illusions of class. Do you know that Carnival, just as an interesting fact, only 36% of the patrons on Carnival Day jumping in costume are now men?
Men.
Yeah. You're talking about men's empowerment.
Yeah.
So that interesting fact. Statistically, men are jumping Carnival again. Now, fellas didn't care of costume, right?
Yeah.
You give everybody a cowboy hat or thing, and by the time we reach Sagicor, all that stuff tear off already.
That's gone.
We just want women.
Yeah.
Right? We just want women and get good.
Yeah.
Fine. But fellas' pockets getting taxed. From the beginning of the year, Carnival band launch. Help with costume. Go to that fete. Soaked. Mess. Ta. Go down south. Daybreak party. This, that, and the other. You have to have the vehicle. You have to help purchase the swimsuits. You have to buy the drinks. You have your partners. You have to catch your kicks. By the time fellas finish do all of that, guys, by the time Carnival Day comes, the fellas they don't have money left. They don't. Pocket fatigue.
Yeah. And interestingly, sometimes the difference between the male costume and the female costume is not that much. So
Well, but look at things that don't make, I tell you things that don't make sense to me in St. Lucia. We have only optimized something like 63% of the port in Castries. So we have not even optimized that port, right? Dr. Anthony did put the docks down in Viewfort.
Yeah.
But there just hasn't been enough overall traffic. So we still need to build up our traffic.
When you say 63% on...
Optimized in terms of the full space and capacity that we have, right?
Okay.
You can go in the economic and social review and these things are there, statistics department and stuff like that. But we have that. Shipping is predominantly from Castries going down south. How is it that if I'm up north or in Castries, I have to get a meal for $20, $25 and I can get a meal for $12 in Viewfort and I get more food? But the question's still not answered. Because how is it the distance of the shipping of the raw materials, if it's fries, if it's whatever, it could be cornstarch, it could be soft drinks, I don't care, right? You can say about brewery in the south, but the point is, why are the prices higher when you had to ship further? Things that just don't make sense to me. They don't make sense to me, right? There are so many things in St. Lucia that you look at and you're like, but why do we do that? And people just allow things to go along. People say, even up to this morning, I was in a credit union and somebody was saying, my father would have been an excellent governor general. My grandfather was governor general. I don't know why we still have a governor general. I can't. I'm sorry, I can't figure it out.
Great debate.
No, but as a well-financed rubber stamper, and the one person who fought against being a rubber stamp and being Dame Paulette, who was selected by Kenny Anthony but kept by Sir John, to me, which is what makes Dame Paulette stand out as, to me, the greatest governor general to date. Just the fact that she commanded that much respect as a stateswoman, right? But the bottom line is, for everybody else, she was removed because she wasn't willing to rubber stamp things, right? Like selling out Queen's Chain and all that kind of stuff. But it comes back to the same thing. Where's the part? Why aren't we questioning things? So many more things that we just not questioning. Let me give you a simple example. Think about how fundamentally, you tell me, how do you think an election date, a set election date, would change St. Lucia? And tell me when you would want to put it.
Well, for me, I think the set date will definitely shake things up, and I think it will give all the interested parties a definite timeline. For me, if I had to put elections, you have Carnival, you have Jazz, you have Junior Creole, maybe November, like the US.
You can, okay, like the US. Now, I don't know why the US has their dates, right? But obviously, we reach festivals. But you also have to recognize that's also times of more storms, more hurricanes, right?
Yes.
Now, if you go in the beginning of the year, then you have to think of the religious community in terms of St. Lucia's being predominantly Catholic.
Yeah.
But we have had elections early on in the year. But do you risk alienating those voters? Now, a set election date gives greater franchise to the entire populace, right? Instead of one man or woman being able to just say,
Ring the bell.
ring the bell, right? But and obviously there's tactical advantage to you being the one to know. But there's also things that will happen the day that we have a set election date, which I support. In America, people like Bill Clinton and them, there are all these stories, anecdotal stuff about how they met with business leaders and DuPont and all of these people, and they manipulated stock prices so that when it came close to election time, if you could have, for example, more crime or more businesses complaining, or you could get health officials to make more noise around a time, because it also could also make you neglect people even more for the first couple of years, because you have those years if the psychology proves itself, right? But these are the discussions that we just do, and then let me tell you what happens in St. Lucia. We talk about stuff, and then we just say, but nothing ain't gonna happen, so we just let it go. I don't let go of none of these things. I let go of none of them. I think of the things that I would like to see changed or experimented with. I think of the things that I want to do. I realize that I have more years behind me than in front of me. But the bottom line is that if I can still experiment or do things now, I would do them. You see what you're doing, even with regard to this podcast. Everybody will tell you this is a waste of time.
Yeah.
Everybody's going to tell you it's a waste of time. Until decades later, my mother was chair of the Archaeological and Historical Society. My aunt, Lady Janice, was chair of the Archaeological and Historical Society. Yeah. My father is a founder, together with Vincent DeVoe, of the National Trust. I didn't know or care about any of these things until I was probably in my 30s. When I turned around and I looked, just as a habit that I didn't even know I had, of curating clips, and to realize that right now, I have most of the political clips, right, of consequence in St. Lucia that I personally curated. The HTS had something like 60,000 YouTube videos. YouTube started around 2000. They had 60,000, but their channel was blocked, right? And a lot of that content, which I think the government should lobby for to get YouTube to release it. I don't know if it's copyright or whatever. But the point is, those archives, there's something of Osbert Dove and the Grindberg and re-signing the lease agreement and all the rest of that stuff. I didn't have that clip. I said, that's online. When they blocked that channel, I lost that. So now I curate everything. I'll download it and just hold it, right? So sometimes you just have to trust your instincts, certain things will be telling you. And at the end of the day, people tell you wasting your time. As long as you enjoy wasting the time, it wasn't a waste of time. What I did with Looshans, it taught me so much, particularly about St. Lucians, patterns of behavior, taught me so much about myself, taught me that I wasn't alone in the things that I thought or felt. And I experienced something that most people, well, maybe there are people who do, but I experience a richness of goodwill that many people don't. Don't get me wrong, there are people who don't like me because I'm an asshole when they write. There are a lot of people who don't like me for things that I've said and done, and I've done wrong things and bad things, and I'm not trying to forgive myself for those things. And there are people who don't like me for my politics or this, that, and the other. But the bottom line is there are still people. Let me tell you something happened to me about 2 years ago. I still remember it. I'm in Massey JQ. I'm dressed up. I have my sneakers on, my Nike, my hat, everything. Yeah. But my wallet is in the car, right? And the girl who also went to go and get stuff, she went in the mall. She didn't have her phone, and she had the keys. And I reached to the line, and I had money in my pocket, but I was missing 92 cents. A lady who still, some people still carry money, not a purse, in a black nylon bag.
Yes.
And the lady had the little square 2-cent pieces and 4-cent pieces.
What?
Only spoke patois, right? And the lady recognized me, and the lady paid the 92 cents for me there. And I told her, no, no, no. And I was feeling like shit. But then I had to remember that for her, she would be insulted if I did not accept her kindness, right? And when you look at that and you say to yourself, wow, boy, St. Lucia is a freaking wonderful place. When people come, there's a clip I can send it to you of Sir John saying in 1971, the people keep telling me, investors keep telling me, St. Lucia is so beautiful, simply beautiful. I'm starting to believe it. And you'll realize the origins of simply beautiful. The truth is St. Lucians don't know that St. Lucia is beautiful. We don't have a true appreciation until we catch our ass in upstate New York or in Winnipeg somewhere or in England. We take a couple winters.
Boy.
And you get your ass boss. Essex and Sussex and North London and Manchester United. And you take some licks under that and you come out and say, boy, St. Lucia, really beautiful.
Boy, walk outside bareback and things.
all of these things. Let me tell you, I was so disappointed. I had that. I went to St. Mary's College. I'm educated, supposedly educated. I reached Canada and I had to stay during like a summer. And I get so vexed. I say, guys, you're all staying in a country with winter. They say 6 months. It's more like 9 months of winter. Right? And then when you all reach summer, you all have the same mosquitoes we have. It never occurred to me that in Canada in summer they had mosquitoes. Now, that's my stupidity.
Yeah.
But then I say to myself, like when I was a kid, I used to see all these videos telling about, snow, snow, snow. As I go up to England, my brother hit me for a snowball. I say, all right, I finished that. Overrated.
Yeah.
Overrated. The greatest Christmas album of original music in the entire planet. Pele. Everybody else re-singing other people's songs.
Somebody will tell you, what's that guy from New York? Frank Sinatra,
original Mwedu. Right? Original. All original. Frank Sinatra's were not all original. Right? Mariah Carey has the greatest song. All I Want for Christmas. Great. That's a song. A man did an entire album. And he did it in 6 days.
Tradition Noel.
He did it in 6 days. And he did it. And the thing is, all live music. No computers then.
Wow.
So if you play the wrong note, you have to do the whole take again.
Yes.
Right? So many things that we just underappreciating.
Wow.
But like I said, we continue. For me, I mean, like I said, time takes its toll. Circumstances take their toll. My daughter is 30 years old. And I used to have in the intro of the show and everything. And I used to ask her, did it bother her? Because I can tell you, if she did not want me to do Looshans, even though she was only 4 or 5 years old, I would not have done it. If I kept asking her, and she said, Daddy, don't mind that. I'm more popular in school. She's 4 or 5 years old then. But I do think it had its effects on her. Like, she's a very private person now. Because, I mean, when you're as extroverted as me, every week, even to this day, guys, why you jump in the Castries River? Nobody realizes the point of jumping in the Castries River, which I did twice, was to point out that we had reached the point of pollution to the point that we had an entire vehicle shell in the Castries River. That was the point of it,
Where was that shell? Was it by Bridge Street?
It's right there in between the two bridges.
That's what I know.
Now, do you know?
I remember seeing that as a
Do you know that Bridge Street, the original bridge there, is over 120 years old? It's 124 now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Please put in this. Wow. Wow.
Those kinds of things. But like I said, the one thing I will tell, and I guess I know time is probably running out, in terms of young people.
Yeah. I think we may be having a call coming in.
Okay.
Just 1 second. Yes. Yes, my caller. You live. Go ahead.
Good evening.
Yay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, caller. Thank you. Definitely the discussion has been both elucidating and informative. You're giving a lot of history, you're giving a perspective that a lot of people don't know. And I think for us, especially when you speak about the identity, I think that's where it starts with the education. Like, what does it mean to be a St. Lucian? What does it mean to embrace our national identity? And for the most part, what you keep on reiterating, which is not having to apologize for things that I think we kind of felt was degrading to our identity.
But
So,
and the degrading being the standards that were set by external forces, you know? I mean, right now, if I told you that the first Amerindians landed right by where Coconut Bay is, Mr. Dahe has the land now, and he's going to be building there. That's a historical site. If they tell you that there are shipwrecks for indentured servants off the coast of VG, which are protecting the bay right now, and the first settlers landed from India, indentured servants, May 6th. Why aren't we doing for that community? We have a Syrian community. What's their history? Why aren't we exploring all of these things? You know? Do you know that the guy who Archie Morez that built the marina, do you know how he became rich?
how he became rich?
He invented the pacemaker, right? Chinese American guy. You know, there's so many things that we don't know. You know, when Christopher Reeve came down, when I tell my daughter Christopher Reeve, one of the people that played Superman, right, came down to St. Lucia, was at Diamond Falls, and they put it in the movie where he picks some flowers, you know, some orchid, but I forgot the name of the flower. My mother has them, and brought it. You know, those kinds of things, and you know, I think we missed an opportunity coming out of COVID, especially. You notice in COVID, the one thing that was lacking was content, right?
Content.
When I say content, I mean to see people that never watch basketball, they're watching The Last Dance because Netflix didn't have anything else.
Yeah.
If there's one time where we could have used the time to promote St. Lucia and explore St. Lucia, you know, Emancipation Day. You realize Emancipation Day still has an awkwardness to it because people don't know the history, so they don't know how to participate in it, in the official dome and how it ties to us and how we think. That's why I told them put a reggae concert so at least people can get the buy-in. We have more reggae artists and reggae bands than we have soca bands in St. Lucia.
More reggae than soca?
Think about it across the generations,
Okay.
right? There are bands that will play soca. We have a soca season. But you can't name 10 5-piece bands in St. Lucia. Because from the time you see you reach past 3 or 4, some of them are either on the cruise ship or they are sharing the same bass player, playing Tuesday night with that band, Thursday night with that band, those kinds of things. I did a project called Jeté with the creative industries to take dance away from just being an ancillary thing. Up to now, we still have confusion over whether it's Silver Shadow or Silver Shadows.
Just
And-
the name.
Silver Shadow or Silver Shadows.
Oh wow.
I go to Soufre. We try and do discovery to find dance troops. If they are not in school, St. Lucia don't have dance troops. In other words, dance is something you do until you're like 18 and finish with that. When we reached Soufre, and Soufre didn't even have a dance troupe.
Wow.
Now, they have now. They may have had before. But when we were doing that, because we don't take those kinds of measurements, have we really, that guy, Marcel, whatever his name is, that is on Fresh Prince, right?
Mm-hmm.
Have we really, do St. Lucians really know him to say that St. Lucians really get him?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
I think that's the name of the flowers.
Yes, there you go.
Anthurium
The
lilies.
orange, the orange lilies.
Wow.
Not lilies, whatever. My mother, all I know is my mother has them. Still.
Nice. Okay. All right. I see we are getting another call. Let's hope everything is okay. All right. Go ahead, caller. You live.
Okay, good night. Yeah, very informative session with Christopher Hunt this evening. I think he has been able to touch on so many areas that maybe the average St. Lucian, millennials included, may not have been aware of. He said earlier also that like with us, our history, he thinks that our history started, around independence, because it's like that's when we got like we base a lot of knowledge, our solution knowledge around that time. But what happened before that? How does it trickle down? How does it impact us in our current generation and those after? He even pinpointed, I think the tram from lower down the one,
Yeah.
that area. And I think that was used to transport, was it bananas or something from,
Oh, like maybe from the port.
There was
yeah,
it was a military base,
Uh-huh.
Fort Charlotte.
Mm-hmm.
So to get stuff up to the top of the mountain.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah. So I'm just calling more or less to say that I appreciate the content that he has covered, and of course, taking us down memory lane regarding Looshans. We all enjoyed that on a weekend. Some of us was just, really looking forward to that. He brought a lot of, again, our general knowledge to life. A lot of us found humor in it, but it was an opportunity for us to learn. And growing up, many of us, when we would ask our parents certain questions, they would just shoo us away and say, "Why are you asking me that?" Or go and read your book to find out. Or that's not why I sent you to school. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that with him coming up with the show Lucians, and with him even being on the session this evening, it shows us and the younger people that it's okay to question things and to seek the information. Information is at our fingertips. It's on the internet. We have our grandparents, we have our nanans, we have even people like him. So the resources are available. So it's a matter of us trying to tap into it. So just saying great job this evening, and hopefully, I see a lot of people in the comments are saying that hopefully Christopher can return, and I totally agree with that.
All right. Thank you, caller.
Well, the my father, um, my father always prides himself on looking forward,
Mm-hmm.
and for a long time he did not grant interviews.
Mm.
And for 15 years I've been trying to interview my father, and only in the last year or so we made a deal to do 5 interviews. I only finished the last one with him and my mother last week.
Oh wow.
And in one of the interviews, I asked him, and it's talk about alternate reality. And I asked my father questions about his mother and his father. The reason he did not know, and even my aunts and so on, was in the generations before, children were not allowed to ask questions.
Mm.
I don't know how St. Lucian or how global that was in its time of the 1940s, 1950s.
Silent generation.
Like, for example, my father finds it amazing when people talk about food options. There was no such thing as food options, you know? I mean, even the descriptions of ice, that people had fridges, but there was no electricity. So people had ice boxes. And Duboulet's started as an ice factory. So you bought a block of ice and you brought it to your home and you put it there to keep things cool. Ice.
Oh, so that's why some of the older people call a fridge like an ice box.
There you go.
Wow.
Those types of things, you know. I mean, I, for one, I think from a commemoration standpoint, and these are things I wanted the creative industries to do. When Invader came down and did Walk and Wine in 1987, video cameras had just come out, and there was literally just a little video of some women going on Eastern Parkway, and that was as close as to a music video as Walk and Wine ever got.
Oh, wow.
You had this guy who could have been St. Lucia's Michael Jackson, KK Elwin, married to Sally Elwin, another great vocalist. And that guy did a song, Lover, and all just riding a motorcycle on a VG stretch, popping a wheelie, that type of a thing. The beginning of our music videos. In the States, they tell you Michael Jackson beat it, right? Billie Jean was like one of the first music videos, right? I remember when St. Lucia got MTV. I remember when we got 24-hour television. I'm sure you would not know that back in the day, you still see them on some houses like Cupsons in town, where they have the aerial that looks like a fork with all the little spikes. And so you had to go all on the roof and stand up and hold. And all you were trying to get, and you had SLTV, and then you had CBC in Barbados, right? And that's where you got to see Sesame Street and all of those things.
Oh, wow.
For me, I know, like I said, I know time is running out, but for me, I want, in terms of young people, I want to say life is not about finding yourself. People say, oh, go on, you do this, that, and the other. Life is about creating yourself. Life, and you talk about creativity like it's some exclusive commodity. I coach tennis and stuff like that at certain points in my life. And more often than not, everybody's a natural. Unless they have some motor dysfunction, you're a natural. I'm not saying you don't have talents, that maybe you may be more of a singer than a dancer. You never notice how many people who can sing have children. You think it's just genetics? Or were they raised in households where there was a lot of singing? Boo Hinkson was raised in a household of musicians. Whitney Houston's mother was in the choir. She sang in the church, right? The shus, the root of the tree, it applies to people. For me, my affinity or my comfort with politics had to come from the fact that I was raised in politics. But what I'm saying for people is that you can be whoever. I mean, let's be honest. Everybody will not say it in the back of their minds. Julian Alfred's trajectory for all St. Lucians, be a hypocrites, all of us, was if she finished Hess, she went and worked at a credit union or the bank. She was on her second child, and I'm not knocking people who have children young. I think Jadia Japierre, for example, who had a daughter young, I think that's one of the most brilliant women in St. Lucia, right? We agree, we disagree, we fight, we whatever, but nobody can argue with her acumen. Yeah. But my point is that we don't believe in ourselves. And we in St. Lucia, you know what people like Rick Wayne tell me? If I had only left St. Lucia, I could have been.
Wow.
Because that's what we say. And in St. Lucia, in order to be a success, you have to be a success before you're a success, and then afterwards, people tell you they're a success. Wow. You see Sammy, everybody kissing his ass now, and all the bourgeois that like to go, oh, Darren, all those same people in Bonten, Cap Estate, and all these places, right? Those same people were making fun of Sammy all the time. Yeah. But when you see one time he came here, and he got something like 58 runs, and we won a critical match, all of a sudden, he's the greatest thing since sliced bread. Yeah. St. Lucians, oh boy, we're the greatest hypocrite. When you win, all of a sudden now they like Julian Alfred. Oh my God, look at her arms, the guns, the this, that, and the other. When that girl was running and they showed Hess, and she had her glasses, and they showed her six-pack. I remember fellas saying, that girl looking like a man. That girl looking like a man. Look at that girl. Now, that's a boy. You know, hypocrites. Hypocrites, right? But the truth is, if you can stomach that, yeah, from then on, everything just starts, like over time, everything just starts to even itself out, and life just makes a lot more sense. And St. Lucia, all I would tell young people is, truth is, you're not young. You're young in St. Lucia. Achievement does not discriminate. So take the chances. You don't get to be old and wise if you're not young and impetuous. Take the opportunities, take the chances. Most of the people, does the average person know when Sir John went to work in Curacao on ships? Do you know that? See, these are the kinds of things that people don't talk about. Bob Marley left music and went and drove forklifts in the United States and then came back to music.
Wow.
Nobody wants to talk about those things, right? Take the chances, right? Take the chances. Somebody tells you, well, you know, you can go to, there's this thing online where you can go to Sweden and you can go to university. Yes, I worry about things like human trafficking and stuff like that. Do your due diligence, but take the chances. Because I can tell you, the one thing I know, people say Castries River. You know how long I was curious as a child about the Castries River? I don't care how salop it was. But I actually know for myself the depth of the Castries River that you don't know.
No.
I know how bad it was in there. While I was sitting in the car trying to film and keep my poker face, a lady came out of New Wave Video Store, I think it was, and she said, and somebody have to put their mouth on that dirty coconut. I hope you pay. You know what the best part is? I've done it. I've done it. Anything I was curious about, I've done it. You see, like right now, I have not climbed Gopito. I'm going to, I just shut up, just go and do it. That kind of a thing. After a while, you just get in the habit of just doing things. And when I look at what we achieved, to me, the generations before mine, my parents' generation, Sir Arthur, did you notice Sir Arthur, Derek Walcott, what did they have in common? For all the genius that they had.
The birthday?
Nope. Homeschooling. Homeschooling. That means that if they were in the system, the way that they were supposed to be in the system, if they were not outside of it, they may not necessarily, I can't say for sure, they may not have necessarily gotten that perspective. And that's it. So for me, the experiments that I did, the questions that I asked, that led to more questions and a Pandora's box of all of the things about St. Lucia, all these things, all it did was just make me more knowledgeable. And even the things that I was wrong about, I don't feel embarrassed about it anymore. You know, because at the end of the day, we're all just kind of learning. And even the people with the PhDs that gone to good school and they come down here and they still don't know some of the basic things that are in St. Lucia, it's good, man. So to me, I still see a huge opportunity. I keep saying that when it came to creative industries, and I say that again. We will never be more American than America. We will never be more Grenadian than Grenadians. But we can be more St. Lucian than anybody else. So we have this huge untapped resource. And as soon as we stop apologizing for it, we're on our way. Julian Alfred, as far as I'm concerned, it is because she got out of here, she got to different places, and she saw a level of success early enough. But the same people who laugh, because most of us look at Twatine as a clown, like Christopher Hunte. He's just humor. He comes to cricket and he puts on costume.
Old mass.
Exactly, old mass. Think about that. Think about, people don't even realize Piche and Kolede, right, from Steve's Barbershop, how fundamental those guys are to national entertainment and what they did for all the DJs and St. Cecilia's Day and all of these things. That's why we need to explore the history and we need to promote it.
Nice. I see lots of comments coming in. All right, so we'll just read for a bit before we we wrap up. All right, you're hiding out on me now. Now I knowing about this program. All right, so we'll just scroll through the comments here. Yes. Big up yourself. We need to believe in ourselves. So true. 100, that's so true. My people, just remember tomorrow is Flubbo Day.
Now you see things like that.
Yeah.
Why do we have All Fools Day? Right? It was to mock a pagan holiday, right? A pagan religious holiday.
Of which was what?
That I don't know what they marked. I've forgotten. I remember because I'm born on April 21st.
That's
right?
the day after.
Now here's the problem. What happens if you have a child on April 1st? I know people who are born on April 1st. You know that feeling when you have to cringe and feel apologetic? Let me give you an example. When I was growing up, people always used to tell me how pretty my mother was. Because my mother is biracial.
Yeah.
And also they took the time, even my closest friends, to tell me how ugly my father was. You know, up to this day, first of all, I could not psychologically process that my father was ugly. I could not understand it. And I still don't,
Mm.
right? I know I look like I've been chasing parked cars, but that's okay. But here's the point though. To this day, I don't use certain words. I'll call you an asshole before I call you ugly.
Mm.
Because the truth is, my brother told me something. If you curse somebody, a fella stop you in traffic, you're motherfucker, right? You and I go, "Wait, that's nothing." But see, if I tell you, I say, you are a stupid idiot. What's the difference between, what is an idiot? An idiot is somebody that has the capacity of an infant that's 3 years old, right? So there's a differentiating factor. You have to think about that, right?
Wow.
But what I'm saying is, even the part about April Fools, right? I don't subscribe to. I just ignore those things. It's like I watch politically. We used to have meetings on Saturdays, national meetings.
Really?
But then a certain number of Seventh-day Adventists came into politics in the 90s, I would say. And then from there,
We have a call.
yeah, we'll take a go. From there, we say we only having meetings on Sundays, but don't other people worship on Sundays? Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening, Christopher Hunte, and good evening to, I didn't get your name, the gentleman in the blue shirt.
Oh, Siobhan.
All right, good evening, Siobhan. I've been listening to the show, and I want to appreciate the history. It's always well and good to, understand where we have come from as a people and where we are going. And I think we need to encourage programs such as these because, you're never too old, too old to learn the history of the nation. And I think even if persons would say, okay, we need to document the history, but sometimes, let us be factual and let us not be hypocritical about it. Most of our people don't read. And so programs like these are very essential in our building and another particular thing in terms of our history that stands out as a people, particularly among the Caribbean the CARICOM community, and then we have to embrace it and cherish it. So I want to applaud Christopher Hunte, and I want to applaud you for such a program. And I just want to see, programs like these we must always encourage and support. Good program, guys. This is Ian Caldwell speaking, and I'm enjoying the program.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Cole.
Now, funny things. I go to St. Vincent. You know the things you take for granted. I go to St. Vincent, and in St. Vincent, I realize the cannons are pointing inland. You know when you go up to Pigeon, everywhere in St. Lucia, cannons pointing out.
Yeah.
Cannons pointing in. Just right next door, St. Vincent. We share the same landmass as St. Vincent. It's just that when you take off in the plane, some of it is underwater, right? But the point of it is that just these little things are so vastly different about us, and we take all of these things for granted. Yeah. When Dunstan St. Thomas said he could kiss a woman and roll from the VG airport, he could roll for 100 yards with the woman kissing and not reach the shoreline, right? Because of how big the beach was. Wow. And if you go to the end of the peninsula, that's where the shoreline was, but soil erosion, those kinds of things.
Oh, wow.
And these things to me are so fascinating, to learn all of these things. And then, like I said, I'm lucky. I come from a family in terms of the history, But I think that St. Lucia, community tourism, we have so much more to market and so many more interesting stories. When they had what's his name, Natty Conqueror, the idea right now, I mean, he can get upset. I think he's a perfect example of taking somebody from an infant level, technology wise, and thrusting them into social media and the psychological issues that come with that. But my point is, just imagine living on a hill disconnected or remotely connected and just being with your family and raised that way. I think there's something fascinating about those things.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of things in terms of St. Lucia that we are just somehow not asking the questions about. And we're so busy trying to assimilate into, social media and Western world. So we want to get into now it's Jerry Springer is outmoded. So we'll go on TikTok and we just want to talk about relationship, this, that, and the other. Rara. But the point is, we have some unique things. We have a lot of unique things. We have interesting things. We just haven't figured out how to package it. You go to Disney World. Why can't I go to a part of St. Lucia where there's a mango orchard with all the different types of mangoes? I go through all the different types of mangoes, the history of mangoes coming from India and all the rest of that, and then come to a mango restaurant, a mango theme park, a mango this, that, and the other.
To buy mango.
Yeah, but why? Why aren't we doing those things? When I said I went into the Castries River, right? It was funny for everybody, but what was I proposing? To use the Castries River as an alternate route, but I was really trying to make a commentary about the pollution in the Castries River. Sir John's last budget address spoke about culverting the Castries River to open up road access.
On which part?
Huh?
He said which part?
He never got into specifics. He passed away like 6 months, 3 months, 4 months later. Right? But just think about these things. When we have a debate over the location of the courthouse, right? Forget about whether the Bar Association didn't want the prisoners and the police commingling with the judiciary and all that. That's not even an issue. How do you get out of Castries East and head down south without going through Castries? You can go through Tuapito.
Through forest, yeah, that side. There.
Right, but you cannot go through Castries. You have to come on the Chaussee Road. The only bypass still available for vision planning is to use where Ferrens Dairy is now
And just go.
and bypass. So you're supposed to be able to bypass all there and end up on the Millennium Highway. But we can't have those discussions because it calls for us. And remember, I asked you the question before. Name one thing that St. Lucians agree on. We don't agree on anything. And because we don't agree on anything, 100% of anything, who we are, what we are, anything, then we cannot move forward. So we just stuck in this circular argument over and over. We make incremental progress, then we regress and we progress again. But we still just, remember I started with the analogy of sitting, your mother kick you out, England kick you out, they put you on the doorstep, right? And that's another story. But you sit down and you're there. Do you just stay on the doorstep and just go, oh my God, no one checking for me? You do something. We are long past the point of do something. Now here's my problem. My parents' generation, oh God, did they do things. Derek Walcott, right? Sir Arthur Lewis, Robert Lee, all of these people. And then I turn and I look at the future generations and the ones that are there now, like Julian Alfred, and I look at Yogi and I see what they're doing. And then you come to, was it Sesame Street? One of these things just doesn't belong there. It's my generation, right? I wouldn't go as far as yours at 30, but I would say 35 to about 55. I call us the Wepuchu generation, right? Just people that just said, you know what, I check in for myself. And they migrate or they stay here and they have a good bank account. They have a good, nice house. Their children go and swim and they send them to school. Like I got the privilege to go to school in Canada. Yeah, we have student loan, but we pay for that kind of a thing. But when it comes to national service, that particular demographic just said, skip me. And then they'll say, but young people, you all need to... No. We are the ones that fail. That's why you have so many recycled politicians on all sides. That's why you see either the politician old or young, and you're missing that
gap.
That gap right there.
As you speak of that, I'm looking at, for example, in the US, right, with their last two elections, Trump winning the presidency at 70 and that was the oldest at the time. Then you have Joe Biden at 78. Now it really puts things into perspective. Like, for example, when Sir John ran at 81,
Yeah.
and they were calling him geriatric and stuff like that. And now you have politicians entering the arena at 30, and they'll call them too young.
And that's the problem. So you right now at 31,
Mm-hmm.
people will tell you, you're too young or you still young.
Why?
Bro, by international standards, you are 4 years away from being middle age. 35 is considered universally middle age. Don't mind people think, because you and I will think 50 is middle age. How many of us living to see 100? Right?
Mm-hmm.
When I went to the polyclinic, and the nurse was explaining to me that from the time you reach 40, downhill, right? It's who feels it knows it is coming, right? But even like I said, that's why I tell you it's important for you to do these things now. Yeah. When I started Looshans, even the people at DBS couldn't understand why I wanted Sunday. Why did I want Sunday? And the only reason I wanted Sunday was because I wanted to carve out a niche, and I wanted to be the opening batsman for whatever people were talking about the next day. And it worked. You here and you on Monday night. You say, all right, Monday night. 5 years down the road or whatever, however long you persevere, all of a sudden Monday night. Do you know where Wednesday night started from?
Wednesday
nights. Solutions go out on Wednesday nights. Besides Saturday and Sunday, when do solutions go out in a week?
To me, I would say Thursday, Friday.
Why? What is driving No, Friday is everybody around the world. Yeah. Saturday is everybody. Why Wednesday night?
Because that's the center of the week.
Wednesday night, Lucifer's, which was where Starfish Hotel is, right? Then Splash, Wednesday night, and JJ's Bar with crabs in Marigot, carved out Wednesday night. In Canada, Thursday night is the big night. Thursday night is bigger than Friday night and Saturday night. But in St. Lucia, we have Wednesday night. Peculiar, huh?
Yeah.
Do you know that Monday night in St. Lucia socially in the 80s, you know what it was?
What?
For Cicero up to Grosley, what was it? Domino's night. You had all kinds of people having domino parties with 80, 90 people on a Monday night playing dominoes. All people like the late Jeff Stewart, Dr. Marius, Dr. St. Rose, all of these people playing dominoes, Lincoln St. Rose, on a Monday night. All over St. Lucia at people's homes. These little things. Look at that. We had a junior chamber of commerce. My father and them were spearheading the junior chamber of commerce. All people like the late, great Uncle Connie James and them. Junior chamber of commerce. Doing all kinds of stuff. You had a junior chamber of commerce desk. Nobody, I think it went defunct about 4 years ago. They tried to bring it back. It didn't come back. Now badly we need a junior chamber of commerce now.
Yeah.
These kinds of things.
Yeah.
You have the youth economy. Wouldn't a natural adjunct to that be a junior chamber of commerce that is vibrant and that kind of a thing?
That can fall under the Ministry of Youth.
Yeah, and when you talk about the creative industries, the innovations happen so fast. If I buy a new phone tomorrow, within months, it's an outmoded phone. But because the change is rapid and government struggles because of bureaucracy, doesn't mean that we should not have purpose things that younger people understand. You know now, your children now will pick up a cell phone and perfectly understand apps.
Yeah.
You know, I used to stay there and I used to say, but wait, explain storage to me. You know why I say that? Because we used to have filing cabinets, and in St. Lucia, even under Sir John, we had to take documents every 12 years and bring it to burn the documents to make space.
Every 12 years?
Yes. But we had storage in filing cabinets. So when you tell me about virtual storage and cloud things, I have to be able to envisage that.
Wow.
So I'm already too old, right? Because I have to think and translate it. But the younger generation then now, who's born into that, right? My little niece is about 8 years old. That child taking any tablet, any phone, and she gone through. Me, I did like a old deck. So again, I know we're closing. Young people, you're not young. Achievement does not discriminate, right? Take the chances, take calculated risks. You never know where you're going to end up. And if there's one thing people like Julian Alfred and so on have proven, it is that taking those chances, taking those risks is much better than living a sedentary life down here and just going along with the masses. I know they tell you same thing, 10,000 Frenchmen can't be wrong, but in St. Lucia, a lot of times the masses are wrong, right? Take that however you want. And the other thing I would tell you that I never had, that my father is an absolute stellar champion of, embrace discipline like it is a superpower, because it is. There are people with all kinds of talent throughout history. But through success and enlightenment, I hated the word discipline. I hated the way it felt like I was constraining myself. But somebody pointed out that discipline is the greatest form of creativity. To find creative ways to do the same things and to be patient and to make that change. So for me, if you can find a way, like Mike Tyson said, discipline, is doing something that you hate and pretending that you love it. When people like Rick Wayne talk about how you have to psych yourself up to almost change reality, and then decades later people will call you a visionary, do it, right? And take your chances so that when you see you reach like him and you get to 31 or whatever, you can sit back and say, boy, I lived a full life. And there's one thing my father will be the first to tell you. He lived a full life. And even with all my success, lack of success, whatever people want to call me, I can guarantee you I am still pursuing a full life.
Profound. Like in the woods of, what's his name? Supi? What a wow.
I thought you were going to say Suku, and that's another legend there.
Yes,
we
big up
forgot
Suku.
Suku.
Yes, up to what day was that I saw Suku down the road. Big up Suku.
You know what I wish we'd do? You see Suku, his hair?
Yeah.
And when he comes from the beach playing football and stuff like that, I wish we could make a statue of that. That would be awesome. Just Suku is just him, just the way that he has lived.
Yeah.
I just wish you could make just a statue of Suku. That, me personally.
All right. Yeah. Well, hopefully the powers that be tune in tonight.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. Which government finding to make a lifestyle statue is like $5 million? Eh?
Wow.
Oh yeah,
that's a lot of money.
And that's what I'm telling you. That's what it was before. After Trump tariffs, that is another thing.
Yep. Well, definitely. I'm seeing lots of engagement, lots of support. The comments are coming in like rapid fire, and what I can say is there is a general appreciation for all the insights that you give tonight, especially when it comes to our identity and what denotes us as Looshans. Because if we all have to agree on something, which I think by definition you say is not possible, but I think we can all agree that Looshans has carved itself as a classic, in our entertainment, in our elucidation, and just our general way of life, the way that you were able to grab a mic, go to the public, empower them socially, even before there were other platforms, before you had the people speak to an open mic.
It's nice to see all the channels with street vibes kind of a thing.
Yeah. So stuff. And doing that in a time where technology was not like what it was, what it is now. I can just stream from my phone, but now you had to get a partner with a camera, and you had to walk behind you.
It's still happening. Desmond Coleman walking around Labrador with that thing. Look, another hero. That's somebody that we're not doing enough justice to.
Yes,
but
yes.
It is what it is. And, you ever notice in all these period movies where it's like, medieval times and stuff like that? You say, but what y'all used to do when the sun went down? And outside of sex or drinking or eating, you try and figure out what they did. Yeah. But always remember, it's all relative, because back in those days, books were the internet. Books were ways to travel through time, space, knowledge, and everything. Paint pictures in your mind. So the one universal constant is that human nature remains the same. People are still going to screw up. People are still going to discover things. People are still going to do whatever. But I will say, in terms of St. Lucia, I just think that the young people, I'm so happy that they found a way out of the matrix. And whether it's Julian or anybody else, follow the lead. Don't follow the lead of the people in the 80s or the 70s until the curriculum and everything is put there. follow your own instincts and follow the leads of the young ones. The what's the name? London, Lawrenson, these people. Follow those people.
Our future 4x1 team at the 2028 Olympics, hopefully. I guess that's what we all hoping for. But yeah, definitely appreciate your insights. Every single word that you said tonight definitely took us on a time capsule. You know, you covered Looshans, you covered your endeavors within journalism, within music, as a professional. There's so much, and I'm sure persons who will be looking back at this video will see there is a lot to offer. I'm even seeing calls for a part 2. So let's see.
Well, we'll give it time.
Yeah.
I don't pretend to be entertaining. And happily, I think the things people would find interesting is the stuff that's not about me. Because that's what I find interesting. I'm not interested in myself.
Yeah.
But I can come back, and I suspect by the time I come back, this will be, as long as you keep plugging away at this. Like I said, have you seen Dune?
Dune?
Yes, the movie.
No.
Do yourself a favor and watch Dune Part 1 and 2. Part 3 is being made right now. It's a book that was written in 6 parts, all the way, I forgot the name of the guy, it was written somewhere in the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing I find most intriguing about it is how it shows how people do things that may be somewhat coincidental, and then the history when we look back at it. So, for example, when you look at Little Richard, to think that Little Richard effectively discovered the Beatles, you know, or that Boys to Men was discovered by New Edition, you know, those kinds of things. To think that Sir John, right, and my father, right, their family doctor was Sir Frederick Clark. They both married his daughters. Right? And my mother and my father met at Government House. And the rest is history. And you see how these things, like the branches start to come out. And there's so much of that around St. Lucia. So I hope we harness it. And like I said, I'll be back. But you gotta give time. And also, I have to be alive.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so let's see how that works out.
No problem. All right. Well, thank you again, Chris. Thank you,
Thanks
everyone.
to the audience. Thanks to everybody.
Yes, thank you for tuning in, staying in, being engaging. Thank you for calling, keeping the comments. Remember to like, share, and keep the message alive. Let's share our identity. And remember, here at Empowerment Daily, we are looking to empower our men, through social change, through information, through teachings, and everything that is possible. So big up yourselves, and we will see you again next week for another episode on Monday. Do have